the October 21st, 2013 meeting of the Falmouth Board of Selectmen. I invite you all to rise and join the board as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Some procedural announcements before we begin. I'd like to welcome this evening. We have the Finance Committee to my left, and to my right we have the School Committee. We have a joint meeting this evening regarding ESCO, which is I apologize, Energy Savings Services Contract. I'm sure we'll get some more detail about that. If you have a cell phone, or some other device that can spontaneously make noise, we ask that you silence it for the duration of your stay with us. If you would like to comment this evening, there will be opportunities for public comment. We ask that you wait to be recognized by the chair. When you are recognized, you please come to the microphone here in the middle of the aisle. Identify yourself for the record. We may know who you are, but that does not mean that the folks at home or our recording secretary does. And please direct all your comments and questions to the chair and do not engage in debate or discussion directly with any individual in the room. Please also adhere to our speakers policy. If you would like to record the meeting this evening, you are welcome to. If you have audio, if you're going to do an audio recording, we simply ask that you notify the board of that. If you would choose to record the meeting through video, you do need to ask permission of the bodies present this evening. This is a joint meeting. So at this time, is there anyone who wishes to announce that they're recording via audio or permission for video?
Speak from here. My name is John Carlson Foss, and I request to record video for my own purposes.
Are there any objections from the boards? Granted. All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I think protocol-wise, the other boards need to call themselves to order.
Okay.
Their respective chairs.
Well, then I'll turn it over. We'll start to my left with the Finance Committee.
Good evening. I would like to call the Falmouth Finance Committee meeting of October 21st, 2013 to order.
Second.
Okay. Good job.
And to my right, the School Board.
Both of them are not present.
So do I have to walk down here?
Again, the microphone.
Hi, I'm Karen Deers. I'd like to call our school committee meeting to order.
Mr. Sousa, there's a presentation for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll defer to Assistant Town Manager Heather Harper, who has a PowerPoint presentation on the ESCO concept that we've been working on for a couple of years. Everyone, hand this microphone. Madam Chair.
First of all, just welcome and thank you all for being here. It really is impressive to see the amount of civic participation that we have. Having a meeting with the school board and the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen is, for me, a very important meeting, so thank you all for coming and participating. An ESCO is an energy services contract, otherwise known as performance contracting, and it's a fairly commonly used tool to allow communities to take advantage of energy conservation measures to assist them with constructing capital improvements throughout municipal and school facilities. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. I want to make a couple of introductions and talk about process. Once I head through the presentation, sharing with the community and the committees what our process has been and where we are, I will then sit down to return the discussion to the chairman. Along with me, of course, is Paul Gentile, who's our ESCO coordinator, and David Ward, who is the town's third-party advisor. He's reviewed all of the material that's been prepared to date and is representing the town. His firm is Energy Engineering and Design Incorporated. So if there are any of the technical questions, Paul, Dave, as well as Jennifer Petit, who's our finance director, is also here, who can help answer any of the fiscal questions, or Julie and I can help answer any of the other program-related questions. I want to make sure you all know there is a team here, and I am representing a full team of staff and consultants that have been working on this project for some time. So I'll start with a little presentation. The town first embarked on an exploration of energy services contracting several years ago as a financial tool to assist the town in meeting unmet capital needs without seeking additional dollars from taxpayers. This, of course, was in a backdrop of very severe fiscal constraints, at which time we had over $8 million in unmet annual capital needs, and with an annual recurring capital need of $3 million plus for recurring capital projects in a range of under $1 million. Projects exceeding $1 million we looked at as being funded with tax revenue, recognizing that there was a real need to take a look at alternative strategies for funding capital needs. This was one that fell squarely within the strategic planning goals of the Board of Selectmen in the town, both addressing capital needs, funding capital needs within operations, and meeting some of our goals for energy efficiency. The town adopted a goal to reduce energy consumption by 20% by fiscal 2020. We haven't caught that goal, and we don't project that we will meet that by 2020 if we don't make some very serious contributions to energy conservation. So this is a two-part project, and it will address both of those goals moving forward. The project was initiated in 2001. There was a full solicitation process, which was a rigorous evaluation of proposals conducted in 2011. All of you on the boards received a full timeline of all of the key milestones for the project in an email last week. The energy performance contractor was selected in 2012, and that is Trane. Trane comes highly recognized throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as a highly responsive and responsible bidder, and that is demonstrated through their work as well as the very rigorous review process that led to their selection in 2012. Energy services contracting is enabled by Mass General laws. It's up there. I won't read it to you, but you can certainly check the statute if that's something that you're interested in. It does a couple of things. It establishes uniform procurement procedures, a tremendous value to the town by streamlining the design, bidding, and construction process, reducing both the cost and duration of construction, thereby enhancing the potential savings to taxpayers by reducing the compounded duration of multiple bidding on separate standalone projects. So as we get into this a little deeper, you'll see that the energy services contract is far-flung, impacting multiple community buildings. In addition, the program allows towns to take advantage of the energy savings attributed to those projects, requires the performance contractor to meet those projections for the life of the bond. So if it's a 20-year bond for 20 years, that energy services contract will be committing to a level of savings that the town will become familiar with. They are also eligible for federal subsidy. It's known as a QSEB, and honestly, I don't know exactly what QSEB is in terms of the terms, but I know what it does. It is a grant that pays a portion of the annual interest payment. The town has applied for the QSEB program, and the notice of award is expected October 31, 2013. So by the end of the month, we're hoping to know whether we're eligible for partial or full payment of all of the interest costs associated with the borrowing on this project. So an energy services contract, this is the third prong, is a financial tool. It's available to municipalities and provides the opportunity to make otherwise unaffordable projects affordable by recognizing attendant energy savings and requiring the performance contractor to ensure the savings over the life of the project. One contractor is responsible for design, construction, and performance for the life of the project, therefore ensuring quality control and cost efficiency due to economies of scale and full accountability. The town and the school department, working together in a partnership in 2012, agreed to remove 2 large projects off of the town-funded capital plan into the ESCO project, and those are both the Morse Pond roof and the Lawrence School windows, proposed through this ESCO mechanism. Windows and roofs are very long payback items. They do not return on their investment on energy savings for many, many years. But they are commonly included in ESCO projects. ESCO projects we'll talk about what they do, but a lot of building envelope improvements. They've been used in communities and school systems such as those shown above, Franklin County, Gill, Montague, Rowe, South Middlesex Vocational Technical School, the town of Westfield, and Old Rochester Regional School. Energy savings will reduce the overall cost of the project, but does not eliminate the cost of the project. Funding capital needs with available revenue is consistent with town policy and our fiscal goals. This was further reinforced again this September in the Board of Selectmen strategic plan, further avoiding necessary debt and capital exclusions. The remaining costs in the project would be included in the town's annual operating budget. Those would be line itemed in our unexcluded debt budget and may be offset by small reductions in overall debt. Annual funding is proposed within existing budgetary limits. Now, the recommended program that you've become familiar with is based on a detailed site assessment. That site assessment identified over $13 million in potential projects throughout the municipal and school buildings. After talking with our staff interdisciplinary team, we propose a project that does not exceed $4.5 million. Currently, a full investment grade audit is well underway, and proposed projects that is proposed to be completed by January. You'll note in the material I sent out on Friday that said December. The train actually has until January 2014 to have that investment grade audit done. And I underscored the word investment grade audit. There was a significant amount of energy, months worth of energy invested in negotiating the contract with Train for the investment grade audit. We felt it was critically important to have that contract in place that would reflect the terms that we would have in place for the construction contract, because the Train would be committing to the performance of any of the energy conservation measures, as well as the performance of the physical assets like the roof and the windows in there. And we felt it was important that they provide that information in a very rigorous way in that contract, and that the result of the investment grade audit would be in fact an instrument that you could take out to the bond market and utilize to seek funds from the bond market. So that's an important additional step. The material that we're looking at now is about a 75% level in terms of detailed analysis. So there's about 25% of the feasibility study to be done before we know what the real numbers are. The school department has some experience with this type of a program. Working with Honeywell several years ago, has documented success with a prior energy services contract. And that was done outside of town meeting under the guidelines that the school department has. Now, the projects that will be included in this entire ESCO include, and these are multiple throughout multiple facilities, aging boiler replacement, replacement of HVAC systems, lighting, building envelope improvements, energy management systems, lighting replacement, roof replacement, and new windows. There are several projects proposed in the ESCO that have been carried on the town's multi-year capital improvement plan and are proposed for funding in this ESCO, and they include the Recreation Center HVAC controls, Town Hall HVAC, Police Department HVAC, Public Works Department automated controls, and building maintenance equipment, and that's a general starred line item in the building facilities budget. The facilities manager expects beginning in fiscal 2019 that we will start to see significant depreciation in our facilities and our assets. So a part or a portion of that would be for building maintenance equipment. And then the Lawrence School windows and the Morse Pond roof. And those numbers are based on a memo from the former school superintendent from fiscal 2011. With an approved ESCO, capital and energy conservation projects would occur simultaneously, initiated and completed within 1 year of initiation in the Mullen School, Morse Pond School, Lawrence School, High School, Town Hall, Police Station, Gus Canty Center, East Falmouth Fire Station and East Falmouth Library, Fresh Pond Water Pump Station, Harbor Master Facility, Edward Marks Building, and Main Street restrooms. In some of those, it's very small work. I think the small items on the end are all lighting projects, but at a time we had a lighting contractor in the community, it made sense to do the lighting throughout the facilities rather than leave those behind. The town manager recommends an ESCO project not to exceed $4.5 million in a strategic partnership with the school department. School facilities would benefit from $3.2 million in investment, and town facilities are $1.3 million. I just want to note for a minute, one of the benefits, particularly in the municipal building, and that is Town Hall, is the HVAC upgrade. There are 4 separate HVAC systems operating in that facility currently. This would propose creating an entire integrated single system, and it would allow us to remove our building and our equipment up out of what is currently the floodplain and will be more in the floodplain as those maps come into play coming this June. So that's a significant value added to doing this project now, is addressing some of the floodplain improvements. And that may benefit the Morse Pond School and Gus Canty, who are also targeted for changes in floodplain mapping. The fiscal impacts would be effective in 2017. So this is a decision timeframe we'd be making in November, expecting to enter into a contract over this winter, initiating the projects over the course of the summer, of course, to benefit the school system, with the bonding and the notes being due in fiscal 2017. And this just shows you the annual debt service on the project without interest subsidy, which is that QSEB program. The debt service is about $405,000 based on 4% interest. The annual projected savings from the project and energy savings is $177,000 a year for a total municipal cost of $228,000. With the interest subsidy, and this will be full subsidy, we don't know what that will be yet, the debt service has been reduced to just paying the principal value of approximately $279,000 with $177,000 in savings for a total annual projected cost of $102,000 a year added to our unexcluded debt budget on an annual basis for the life of the note. So I'm just returning back to the beginning. The town first embarked on the exploration of energy services contracting several years ago as a financial tool to assist the town in meeting unmet capital needs without seeking additional dollars from taxpayers. An ESCO is simply a vehicle to make projects more affordable in a cost and time-effective design, bid, and build process. Allows for interest subsidy through the QSEBs to reduce costs. Does not require any additional taxation. Is proposed within planned budget growth policies. Is consistent with our fiscal policy and funds planned capital needs. So I now will turn the meeting back over to the chairman and happy to answer questions with any of the staff or consultants who are here to help us.
Any questions?
Oh, sorry, sure.
Hi, my name is Nick Lowell. I'm on the Finance Committee, Vice Chairman. I guess would you entertain just a couple corrections to the presentation first, and then I have some comments to make also. So the QCEBS is actually a QECB, which is a Qualified Energy Conservation Bond. It's a project that was funded through the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, and it is targeted for energy conservation measures. So there's one correction to the sheet. The other is that the current interest rate that we got from South by Southwest today is running at 5.04%, not the 4% in the presentation. However, The way that they funded the debt was differently, so the net payment was a little bit less because of, well, Jennifer could explain, but the actual payment was a little bit less, but the actual interest rate was higher. And also not included in the cost was something that we discussed previously, and I thought should be in there, which is there's about, Train had estimated a ballpark of $100,000 of maintenance that's necessary on an ongoing basis to the new equipment that would impact the budget. So that numbers, I would argue, should be a little bit higher.
Clarification.
One, thank you. I did admit I wasn't sure what the QECB was, but I know what it does. Thank you. I appreciate that. And a couple of notes. There would be attendant annual costs associated with that. We do not know what those are yet. We currently have existing costs for maintaining our existing HVAC systems throughout our municipal and school buildings. How that translates to what the new costs will be comparative to what the old costs are, we simply don't have that information yet. The other thing that we are not calculating as a savings to the project are the deductions for the capital needs that we are taking advantage of or taking care of outside of that. So we haven't done that net out on there. This is very high level in terms of what the presentation is, but those are good points.
Any other questions from the boards?
I just wanted to check with Bonnie. Did you want to ask a question, or you want me to ask it?
If you want to tear it down, or just go ahead. One microphone.
So I'm curious about this slide that talks about the town's annual operating budget, as to how that would have an impact on the school's budget. So is there a cost to the schools for participating in the program?
Well, those are definitely things that we would be working on as we head into 2017. But certainly one of the costs that the schools would have to bear would be the reduction in energy savings. So we'd have to ensure that the energy savings that are attributed to the school projects are in fact reduced from the school budget so they can then pay the related debt service.
Any other questions?
My question would be, what would you base those numbers on? Only because I know in schools now we're using more and more technology, more and more things being plugged in. Our energy costs overall are going up. So I was just curious how you base that number. Because if it's an average of the last 10 years,
And I might defer a little of this to Dave Ward, but I'll do the short answer, and then if you need a longer answer, he can give that to you. The energy conservation performance and the savings will be based on the cubic volume of energy projected to be saved by the energy conservation measure. And that will be included in the contract. That's part of what this investment grade audit will tell us, is exactly what Train will commit to in terms of annual savings. Now, the caveat to that is that it requires the facility to operate in the same manner as projected. For example, Town Hall. We operate Town Hall almost 24 hours a day, but it's open a lot of the time. If we decided to change the operating hours, or if the schools decided to open their buildings longer than they're currently open and you're consuming more energy, that would be a change in the function of the facility, but the volume would still be maintained, but the percentage would differ. So it's not a dollar for dollar, it's a volume for volume.
Any further questions?
Many of the items on the list, there's a more detailed list that I've gotten at a previous meeting, have a very long payback, and they essentially don't pay for themselves anywhere near within the 19 years of the QECB that would be. So in the end, we'll have only partially, if you can think of it this way, they've only partially paid for themselves by the time that we've paid off the bond. So long and short of it is that we are going to end up needing to replace these things before they pay for themselves. So it seems like there should be an accounting for the fact that these things will wear out before they've actually paid for themselves. Is there any provision for the ongoing replacement of these items? Not following. But, so for example, okay, so at the Public Works building, the plan is for a new condensing boiler. The boiler pays back for itself in, according to the rule, this is an estimate, but 114.9 years. So that condensing boiler is not going to last 114 years, so we'll end up needing to replace it. It doesn't make sense to me that it would be on the list as part of an energy conservation project when it's not going to last for the amount of time to pay itself back. What's the rationale for having that on there?
Mr. Chairman, I think Dave Ward, our consultant, should appropriately address that, and we can weigh in as well.
Good evening. My name is Dave Ward. I'm a consulting engineer and have a good deal of experience working on these types of projects, and I'm the owner's agent for the benefit of the town. Mr. Chairman, the question pertains to equipment that does not last as long as it would take to pay for itself out of energy savings. That's a pretty common occurrence in this type of project. There are many things that are included in the project that have to be done, like replacing boilers. If the boiler died next year, you'd have to replace it, whether it saved energy or not. And so the idea is to get ahead of the curve on these things and include them in a comprehensive project. The overall savings would reduce the energy cost to the town. So the idea is to have a comprehensive project that addresses many needs, not just looking at cost savings, because there are other savings that were not included in the calculation. And part of my job is to evaluate the proposal from Train to make sure that all of the costs that the town will bear are included in the contract, and all of the benefits that the town will accrue to the town are also included. And then that will be presented to the town so that the town can select at that point which ones of these things should be in and out. These numbers here, as Heather said, are about 75% finalized, and so they're still a little rough. Thank you.
What, Mr. Ward, I was wondering, could you explain what assurances we have that we're getting a fair price for the equipment that we're buying? Because with the ESCO project, it's unlike other projects that the town typically does. It's not subject to the standard mass open bid laws. Once we give, in this case, Train the project, they can go out, bid that separately, and pick whichever vendor they like for the reasons that they like. It's not as transparent as a process as we would normally have, and there is I've spoken with a couple people that have more experience with this than I have, and they have inferred that at times there can be a considerable markup on the overall project. And so how do we know that we're getting a fair price on the equipment that Train is going to offer for us when we don't have that state bid law, or the regular state bid law rules?
That's a very good question. Heather? Yes?
Tom and Judy, thank you. Passing the mic. There will be a markup on the equipment. That is a fact. That's part of the process, but there will be no repetitive sequential bidding. Under a normal project, you do the designer selection process where you would spend time and money selecting a designer, writing specifications, issuing a bid, participating in many of these projects in a sub-bid process where the general contractor would be limited who the general contractor could select to those firms who chose to bid on the project, and then would have to select from those individual firms. It eliminates that process of the designer selection process and the bid process, so it does save some money, but Train is going to get paid for some of that as well. That is a fact. That's part of the cost of the project, is the overhead for that work that they will provide to the town. In terms of the costing, that's really where Dave's work comes in, is evaluating the overall project, the individual equipment. He will be looking at every specification for every piece of equipment to make sure that it has the life cycle values and the energy saving measures that is going to be in the best interest of the towns and the schools. So he'll have that opportunity to do that on an item by item basis, and that's my understanding of what we've hired Dave to do, and he's shaking his head and saying yes. So.
Yes, that's true. First of all, the markup was part of the selection process, and that's fixed. We know that in advance. That was one of the reasons why Train was selected. As far as the selection of the subcontractors, you're right. Train is not obligated to pick the low bid. They can pick the best, the highest quality, the best value, the people that they've dealt with in the past. They have many reasons for selecting the vendors that they select. Part of my job is to scrutinize the vendor and the quotes and the specifications so that the town knows that they're getting the best value, the lowest life cycle cost, not the lowest first cost. And that will be discussed with Heather's team and the town prior to any subcontracts being let. That is to say, the town will have input as to which vendors are selected. It is up to Train to select the, they get the final selection, but my experience with Train and other ESCOs is they are inclined to pick the contractors that get along with the people in the town, because sometimes they've had the most experience with the town. So the town certainly has input into the selectors, the vendors, and the products selected.
Follow up?
Could you just clarify, you said the markup is fixed? Do we lose the volume on this? The markup is fixed, but is that a fixed percentage or a fixed dollar figure?
It's a fixed percent of the project cost. The project cost at this point is unknown. It develops as the project does. So it's a percent of the cost, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy?
I just wanted to ask a question for clarification and then make a couple of comments. The question is, does in fact Train guarantee the savings when we enter this contract based on an annual audit? That's my first question to either you or Heather.
Yes, sir.
So then my next part is a comment. In regard to the savings that we're talking about up here, they're guaranteed by Train, which has been the selected purveyor in this case. There are a couple of issues. Just because there are capital needs that are showing up here this evening does not necessarily mean that those capital needs are on our top priority list as a community. They're the capital needs that in fact could be provided for under this energy savings program. Some of these boilers, roofs, windows may not be a priority to the entire community. As a matter of fact, I pulled our 5-year capital plan, and next year there's roughly $6 million in capital needs, of which we're proposing to fund 3. The year after that, an additional $6 million, an additional $6 million the year after that, and an additional $6 million the year after that. This is an opportunity for this community to be creative and find out a way to be able to get some of these things done that may have to wait their turn, number one. Number two, I think it's important, and Nick brought up a good point in regard to the bid list. We've all seen how great the bid list can be. We've ended up in this community many times taking a contractor or someone who's won a bid merely because they meet the state standard and they're the lowest bid. Ultimately, we pay more and we have shoddy workmanship. Quite candidly, I'm going to make the comment. We're talking about two items up here. Number one, windows at the Lawrence School that were replaced in the last 15 years. We don't replace windows in our own home. This contractor, Train, is going to guarantee the savings on those windows. They're going to have to pay that savings if in fact they're not properly spec'd, they're not properly installed, and they're not properly audited. The same goes for the roof at the Morse Pond School. The roof was replaced within the last 15 years. None of us do that in our own homes. Replace roofs and windows every 15 years. We have a contractor, meaning Train, who is not necessarily going to take the lowest bidder. They're going to find the bidder who's going to give us the best job, provide us the best product, and then guarantee that we're going to have those savings. Folks, it would be great to think that we're going to clear everything on this 5-year capital plan. But we're all realistic. Let's put the capital plan aside. We have wastewater issues, water filtration issues. This is an opportunity for this community to be able to embrace some of these savings. And as we say, I was a skeptic at first. I've got to be candid. But we have an opportunity with a company like Train who's going to guarantee the savings moving forward. And that was one of my key questions, to make sure that those savings are guaranteed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since the issue of payback was already raised, in looking at the payback times of the various components of the plan, the various pieces of equipment, they're all over the map. I mean, they're all different times. Is there one predetermined payback date for the entire project, or do they actually follow these specific payback times as they are on the sheet?
Yes, they follow the payback times as they are on the sheet, except for they do, at the end of the day, when all the projects are put together in one performance contract, there is one number that you see at the top of the page, that there is one total cost and there's one total savings, so that gives you one payback term. So yes.
Kevin, I'd like to correct a couple of comments that are not quite accurate about the Morse Pond roof. That's the old portion of the roof that was not part of the renovation contract that needs replacing. And it's my understanding that the windows are the old windows that were not part of the Lawrence additions and what have you. So these are older windows, not part of work that's been recently done. Okay, just to make that comment. But I have a question for the Selectmen and for the Finance Committee. Have you thought about the impact of the quality of education of taking these debt exclusion costs and putting it into the operating budget? We have been cutting out resources for the school department for the last 5 years. We've gotten rid of extracurricular programs. We've gotten rid of department chairmen. We have almost gotten rid of the Seashore program. It's only been through the efforts of the Falmouth Education Foundation and a lot of parent support and raising money that we've been able to actually maintain some of these highly respected and treasured, if you will, opportunities for children. And we've cut staff back. We've increased class sizes to try to cut the cost per student down. That's 5 years worth. We just found out that we have new residents that have moved into Falmouth that we must send to out-of-district schools because of their special needs, to the tune of $600,000, which was not in the budget that we submitted back in January and February. I don't know where we're going to find it. We've already frozen the money that principals use to buy resources for teachers to supplement, to be more effective in engaging kids. But I don't know where the money's coming from right now. We haven't had a time to really step back and look at this. In our meetings on Wednesday of last week with Julian Suso, Heather Harper, Jennifer Petit, Dr. Gifford, Mike Ward, Judy Fenwick, and myself, we heard several numbers mentioned to us that basically indicate that we probably will get $300,000 less of an increase to support the contractual obligations we've already signed. And from what I understand, we collaborated on coming up with the rates all through the negotiating process, and only at the very last moment did Julian Suso, at the meeting where we were asked to approve the contract, decide to cast a negative vote. We tried to cooperate on that, but now we have those obligations. What does this mean? Well, if the numbers I'm seeing are correct, we're looking at about $1 million of reduction in support for what we currently offer as an educational program. That's like 20 teachers. You push all those kids that those teachers, those are classroom teachers, you push them into all those other classrooms, you're going to jump the ratio of students to teachers significantly. Who's going to be impacted? First, it's going to be those kids on free and reduced lunch who come from families that unfortunately do not have the income to supply their children with the kind of resources that all parents would like to be able to supply. And these are the kids that struggle the most academically. It's going to affect special needs kids because we are required to include them in regular classrooms. You think that teachers are going to have as much time to engage those kids and try to differentiate their instruction to make sure that they are moving along and progressing at this age? It's going to impact the average kid that's in there that's daydreaming, that the teacher doesn't have time to go and engage them and kind of get them to pay attention. And it's going to, in fact, impact those talented kids who now will not be given that extra enrichment opportunity to challenge them to continue to learn. You create a classroom environment where teachers are so stressed, our students are going to be impacted, and there's just no other way around it. That's what's going to happen. I'm a teacher, a retired teacher myself. I've seen it in the classroom. I know what happens when you have 30 kids that you have to teach to versus 15. It's an enormous difference in your ability to keep each kid engaged and accelerate. Falmouth has every reason to be proud of its educational program. We have 3 exceptional schools as of last year's test results. And we have 4 schools that are above average. That's all of our schools, all above average. There's no way we're going to be able to maintain that if we have to swallow the kind of reductions in revenue that moving debt exclusion costs into the operating budget will do. It's just, have you considered the impact of the quality of education? I think this town values that quality of education, and I would suggest that you're not really representing the interest of this town.
I actually have a question myself, and perhaps Ms. Harper or Mr. Suso or our consultant could elaborate on the answer here, but I guess I was under the impression that pursuing an ESCO would help save the town money and by inference would also help save the schools money, so perhaps there could be some clarification.
Just to be clear, we're talking about something that would go into effective 2017, not 2015, not 2016, but 2017. So that's three full budget cycles from now. This would have no impact on the fiscal 2015 budget or the 2016 budget. So we'd have 3 full years to plan exactly how the town would take on the additional unexcluded debt. These are not debt exclusions, and I just might remind that the message that we received in pursuing the ESCO was to develop a strategy to avoid additional tax dollars to support ongoing capital needs. So that was the assumption indeed, was to use operating budget revenues to do that. And the operating budget will grow. It grows every year. The school budget grows every year. The demands on that growth always outpace what's available. But what I will show you is with the interest subsidy, and we don't have any guarantees here today, with the interest subsidy, there would be $177,000 in annual savings. Of that annual savings, about 2/3 of that is school savings. So rather than paying that on escalating, I'm going to repeat, on escalating energy costs, which you're going to pay anyway, and they're going to grow, as history tells us, you'll move those dollars from your energy budgets to paying off windows and roofs. So you won't be paying them on your energy, you'll be paying them on your debt, leaving somewhere between $220,000 and $100,000 a year that needs to be shared somehow between the town and the school. We also expect that within the declining debt budget by 2017, that we may have some additional room to reduce that impact overall. So that as we move into the implementation, that's where we'd have that conversation. But that we wouldn't be looking for funds from the school budget in 2014 or 2015.
A follow-on question?
Well, it's just to point out that these capital improvement costs are not the only thing that's being taken out of our operating budget. It's also the increase in health insurance. And now what you're saying is you're just going to keep adding to it, and that's going to continue to compound and have even greater effects in the future. So you're absolutely right. No, the numbers I saw had nothing to do with this particular ESCO contract, but they did have to do with pushing, the cost of health insurance, which I understand is real, onto us. And I might say that Rebecca can testify to this, that we actually had our state representatives in to try to lobby them about 2 years ago, three years ago, to try to do something about increasing health costs. And they actually were instrumental in trying to get the state to pass that health care, reform bill. So we actually have attempted on our part to influence our legislatures to try to do something to help all of us, not just Falmouth and not just the school department, get our health care cost of premium increases somewhat under control. It's the quality impact that really is worrying me to death right now.
Yeah, so I've been involved in the ESCO project since somewhere near the beginning, and we actually went to the train presentation when they gave that coming up on a year and a half ago, I believe it was. And this ESCO project has been very interesting to me, but also scary. The interesting thing is that those $177,000 of projected energy savings, absolutely, we should be doing those things. We should be reducing the carbon footprint of the town. We should be saving that money and not, literally having it go up the stack. However, I've also been extremely concerned about putting big capital projects into this. And I like metaphors, so here's my metaphor, is we have this boat of these annual energy savings, lighting projects, electrical controls, variable frequency drives, some HVAC improvements. That boat floats nice and high when you have those things in it. They're like the styrofoam. But then we're taking the roof, the windows, some of these boilers that have very poor paybacks, and we're putting them in. Those are the cinder blocks. At this point, we've got so many cinder blocks in the boat that it's not floating anymore. So that we're down here so that we have to pay out $102,000 if we get the full QECB subsidy. That doesn't make sense to me. So I completely agree that we should put that the Lawrence School windows for $1.2 million should be on our capital list. I completely agree the Morse Pond School should be on the capital list, but it should not be on this list because these projects have a payback of the Lawrence School windows estimated at 513 years, i.e. they don't pay back. The estimated energy savings for those is $2,339. That's how much Train is putting on, that's how much they're risking. They're also risking the windows might leak, but the ESCO project has a 20-year life. It's not a big stretch to say that you're going to have windows that are going to last for 20 years. It's not a big stretch to say you're going to have a roof that lasts for 20 years. The savings on the Morse Pond roof is $1,775. These are just rough estimates, but so a couple $1,000s on a $884,000 roof, it doesn't make sense. So my take is we should take those projects out of this ESCO and put them on the ballot in the spring for the voters to decide on a debt exclusion. What this does then is it means that we're going to eliminate about $2 million out of this project. Now when we look at what take that sheet, take $2 million out of it, now the boat's floating again. If I went a little further, I'd take a couple other things out also. We have some of the boilers that have 140-year payback and whatnot, probably don't belong in there. And overall, my secondary concern is that we are paying a lot for some of these things that should have, many of these things have a high markup to them. Now, I'm sure that Dave is going to do a good job of trying to beat this down, but we have to be a little bit careful about things like lighting controls, building envelope, transformers, some of these things that have a pretty good payback, but they should have an even better payback. At my old company, we would not do an energy efficiency project unless it had better than a 4-year payback. And you'd say, well, that's not very long, you know, couldn't you be more generous? But it was easy to find projects that had 4-year paybacks. On this list, there's only, if I'm correct, I think there's only 1 or 2 projects that have less than a 5-year payback. So there's something wrong with the calculation here, and that makes me nervous also. But at a very minimum, I don't think I could support this without taking the windows and the roof out of the project, because it's just taking that boat and sinking it. I want to get that boat floating again.
I'd like to remind the board's it's 10 minutes of 8, so please make sure you focus your comments so we can continue to move this along. I've got Mrs. Peterson, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And then Mr. Sousa.
But my question actually is for Mr. Ward, and it has to do with what other towns, you've worked with other towns too as an advisor on projects like this? Okay, because I know you're talking about the boat, but I think what my point as a town meeting member, not just a school committee member, is Falmouth is one big boat. And if I understood Kevin Murphy, Selectman Murphy, and maybe I misread you, but I felt like you felt like it was a good idea to keep those windows in there because the total value is not only the payback, that's just a small percent, and that's what I wanted to ask you about, but also the value is to have somebody stand behind the work, have somebody guarantee the work, get the projects all done in a timely manner. These are projects, the roof and the windows are things that need to be done. So it's not simply the payback that we're looking at. And as a town meeting member, my focus would be on those numbers. Once we get that additional 25% and so as a town meeting member, I would look and I say, okay, is that worth it to me to get all of this stuff done or not? But my question would be, are we the exception for including longer payback? Is there a general rule for what the time is on a payback?
Yes, there's a general rule. The general rule keeps changing with the times. That is to say, a few years ago, it was relatively easy to find quick payback items. That work has mostly been done. Witness all the lighting projects in Falmouth that have already been done. Those typically shorten the paybacks. To answer the other part of your question, generally, towns and school districts and other clients that I have include these deferred capital projects in this sort of a program because it is typically one of the quickest ways to get them done, because sometimes I know in my own town, Framingham, we have challenges just paying for things that we have to have done, let alone things like boilers and roofs and windows. It would be nice if you could just ignore the boilers and the roofs and the windows. Unfortunately, that's not an option. So this is one way of getting them done. It's standard practice.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just a couple comments. One of the things I wanted to underscore is that the ESCO process is part of the procurement package available to schools and towns in the Commonwealth. So I want to be careful that no one misunderstands or misinterprets that this is not an appropriate procurement process. It is just the opposite. It is totally affirmed and provided for this town and every other town and school by state statute. And number two, with all due respect, if we're strictly going to look at payback, we're never going to replace any windows or roofs, whether it be with a capital exclusion, a debt exclusion, or any other kind of exclusion, because the payback itself is not going to suggest that it ever be done. And my concern with ignoring an ESCO and ignoring this opportunity that the Commonwealth has provided to schools and towns, and as Heather has shown in the PowerPoint, there are a number of schools and towns that within their ESCOs have replaced roofs, have replaced windows, and it's all about a balance. It's about that overall return on the entire investment and not just choosing what we might call the low-hanging fruit. Keep in mind that if we finance these alternatively through, it would require, of course, a taxpayer override, and I think that's what's being advocated here tonight, and I want to make it clear that that's what's being talked about as an alternative to the ESCO. The ESCO does not require an override. The alternative debt or capital exclusion does, of course. What we're denying the taxpayer is the ability to capture this federal subsidy that we have applied for. That would not be available to the taxpayer except through this ESCO process. So let's keep in mind that if we're going to go with a debt exclusion or a capital exclusion and start to cherry pick and pull these projects out, we're talking about higher costs to the taxpayers and overrides to get this job done. And if we're strictly going to look at it from a payback return process, you can't ever justify doing these. But as somebody else pointed out who has certainly more experience than I do with this, when boilers fail, when roofs fail, when windows fail or cease to create the kind of protected environment that our students and teachers deserve in schools, then you have to step forward and take care of it regardless of the cost. So let's plan ahead. I would urge that we plan ahead as we've been attempting to do with the schools. We've been working on this for over 2 years, very carefully, very thoughtfully. We have a very aggressive capital program, as Selectman Murphy has talked about, and we can either pursue it through continued taxpayer overrides or try to live within our means, try to take advantage of the ESCO process that the Commonwealth has made available to schools and towns, and to give some taxpayers some of that interest relief that would potentially be available to us. That's really the choice that lies before us tonight. We can walk away from that and go down the same old road, but those dollars in the taxpayers' pockets are not going to change. We're just going to require more of them.
Could we get some clarification about the timelines here that are necessary in terms of these bodies either approving or not approving us moving forward, and what we expect to see in the next months and years regarding this?
Well, the next step, Mr. Chairman, is there is a town meeting article at the upcoming fall town meeting, November 12th, which would be required to seek town meeting concurrence. As town meeting members and others are aware, we've been speaking with town meeting, updating them periodically on this, as well as others in this room, over the last 2 years. And we represented back in the spring that we would be coming back to town meeting members with a package of proposed projects, town and school side, and that's exactly what is occurring on November 12th. That would require a favorable vote at town meeting to take the next step, and then the investment grade audit would be concluded, and we would have the green light to work with Train to assemble and implement this list of critical town and school side projects within the coming year. And other nuances, I'm sure Dave Ward and others could fill in the blanks on that schedule.
So, I'm going to ask another question. So as far as authority goes, we need town meeting approval. Do we need concurrence from these bodies, all three of these bodies obviously, for recommendations, or simply, or is it actually, would their approvals be needed in order to conduct the work and move forward with this?
Bottom line, Mr. Chairman, the town meeting would need to act. We welcome, and solicit, as we've already indicated, the support of these three important bodies that we're sitting with here tonight. One has not acted as yet, and that is the Finance Committee. By my memory, they have not acted officially to take a position on this town meeting article, and that is yet to come.
Do we have any other questions, Mr. Murphy?
I just wanted to make a clarification, and Nick brought out a good point this evening. The clarification is, yes, there are some items that will be paid off in 4 or 5 years, some items up to 7 years, and all these other items may be over 40 years or what have you, but the bond is only going to be for 20 years. So we're going to get the benefit of all of these projects within the next 20 years and to be paid off within the next 20 years. Granted, the life of those projects are not. We're blending projects together. We can always take the cream off the top and just do the lights, but we have an opportunity to be able to do more for this community in this project. When we first get into this, I have, as an elected official, I have a fiduciary responsibility to the folks in this community. But my idea and ideal wasn't specifically the schools. As we see, the schools are the mother lode here because you have more buildings. It's by no means a stone being thrown. There are just more buildings because we have an opportunity to have more savings. My last question, and what I want to ask folks is, what if we go to the ballot and we miss the vote and it doesn't get passed to put a new roof on new windows? Are we going to be able to live with that? How are we going to be able to put a patch on that boat when it's sinking? That's my question. We have an opportunity to be creative to do some of those things all together without going to the ballot, without competing against different projects. As we all know, we have a multitude of different projects that are coming forward that are going to be on this year's ballot, that are going to be on the following year's ballot. So we have an opportunity to collectively, this is a workshop. I have no skin in the game. If the schools don't want to participate in this and you say, well, we'd rather cast the die and try to go to the voters, so be it. But my question is, and my thought are, we have an opportunity to get this at a very reasonable and thought-provoking way and be able to say to the taxpayers out there, folks, now we're going to come back to you. We want money for things, but we have a way to pay for some of our capital projects. So that's my question to everybody here. Thank you.
I guess my question is, if we get the subsidy, that's one thing. But if we don't, by my calculations, that's $2.5 million in interest that we've paid for a $4.5 million project. Is that correct?
You would pay the interest regardless of the funding source. So it's only through the ESCO program that you get the benefit of a payment of part or all of the interest. If you paid for the project through a general obligation bond, whether it's excluded or unexcluded, you're going to pay the interest. But it's only through the ESCO that you get to participate in the QSET program.
But the interest rates will be different,
The interest rates may be different, right?
substantially.
Not substantially,
5% versus
4%.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah.
Hi. It seems like this is two parts, the financing piece and then the actual contract with Train. And my question on the financing piece is that we have a 20-year bond that we're talking about, and if we get the QSET, is that also 20 years, or does that have to be renewed annually? That's the first part.
sorry, let me defer.
Good evening, Jennifer Petit, Finance Director. Actually, I was speaking with our financial advisors today, just to make sure that I had all the information correct. And it is over 19 years, it's not 20, they just changed it. And they do review it every year, the federal government, to make sure, you know, if we're awarded with the $4 million, they will review it every year. But you're looking at up to 70% interest cost that is reimbursable, and the total amount over the 19-year period is $1.5 million.
The energy savings?
No, nothing like that. It's just from the federal government. They actually set this interest rate daily, and because it's part of the Reinvestment and Recovery Act, you know, when the budget goes to Congress, it's just part of the budget, so.
Okay. Can I ask the second part? The contract with, the contract with Train, it was suggested earlier or stated earlier that its fees are in the markup on the equipment. So am I correct in saying that this is a cost-plus contract? And if so, what's their markup? And are there additional fees for Train besides the markup on the equipment they do?
Yes, there's a different markup for each type of energy saving measure, like lighting has one and HVAC has one, and they were all part of the initial selection process. There are other fees, and they have all been listed. It's the process called open book, closed book, so that prior to signing the construction contract, the town will be able to evaluate all of the costs. And so there is things like construction management and engineering and all of these typical things on any large construction project. They're all line items within the overall cost breakdown, and that's public information for the town to check out. And that's part of what I will do, is make sure that all of the costs that are submitted as part of the project are in line with all the costs that were proposed in the initial proposal.
And those costs are part of our total savings or total costs that have been shown? I'm not sure.
Right. The costs are part of the estimated costs that are there. The savings, I want to make one point, are only conservative estimate of the savings that will be guaranteed. Is another thing that I will check, is the savings calculations. What is not included in the savings are avoided capital costs and maintenance costs. So typically, in my experience, if you have a really old boiler, you spend a lot of money to maintain that. If you put in a brand new boiler, the maintenance costs go down. So the savings figures that Heather has given you are only estimated energy savings. We have intentionally left everything else out until the final project is selected and all the details are worked out, and then we can roll those in as the town wishes to adjust the financing to suit your needs.
All right, I would like to open it up, see if the public has any questions or comments.
Mark Fennerin, Precinct 6. Did I understand, Mr. Murphy, that if this is done in this manner, it would allow you to, for want of a better word, circumvent the taxpayer and not bring this to town meeting?
We're not circumventing the taxpayer. What we're doing is paying for these projects by utilizing the savings in energy costs as opposed to going directly to the taxpayers and asking for overrides.
Okay, so they wouldn't have any input anyway.
It comes through, the input
Still gonna go to
comes,
town meeting.
the input comes through town meeting and these boards. That's why we're meeting this evening.
Okay. Also, I have to agree with Mr. Lowell. The Public Works building is essentially brand new. And condensing boiler technology was available when that building was built, and it was a mistake not to have it in there then. And further, that building should have at least been supplemented with some kind of wood burning technology, because we throw more than enough wood out every year to heat all the public buildings in this town. And I have a little bit of experience with this. And as far as the discounts, or whatever you want to call it, they're multi-tiered. I can give you an example. Someone I knew who was switching from oil to gas. They got an estimate for a condensing furnace boiler for $2,300. Tried to help them out. I asked a plumber friend of mine if he could price the furnace out. He got a price of about $1,550. I went into the same place where he got the price, and I frequent all the time, and I was able to purchase that boiler for $918. That boiler also came with a $700 government rebate. So if you pursue this thing, there are considerable savings you have. They're not doing this for nothing. They're making a profit. Where do those government rebates go? Do they go in our pocket or theirs?
We get the rebates and they would offset the debt.
Okay. But as I say, they're doing this for a profit. I mean, we have the ability, or maybe we don't have the ability, but the opportunity would be there for us to pursue this in the same manner that I pursued my friend's furnace. But we don't really have a great record for that. Insulation at Town Hall is an example. I think we should just be careful how much we spend and how much we bite off here, because we may not realize the savings that we hope we do. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments from the public? Mr. Patterson?
Yes, Brent, I just wanted to mention, you said, Brent, you said that the cost would be covered by the savings by going through the ESCO project, but you're also planning to push the costs onto the operating budgets of the various departments in the town. And again, I'm going to ask the question, what's that going to do to reducing the quality of the work across the entire town? Not just the school department that I'm concerned with, but you're talking about moving capital costs onto the operating budgets of all of the various departments. I assume we're not going to be the only ones.
Just to clarify, I'm not certain who you're quoting in saying that somebody has affirmed that operating budgets for FY17 are somehow going to reflect or be decreased by an amount necessary to reduce the debt. All we have indicated is that energy savings realized will be recaptured and utilized to help pay down that debt. And then dependent upon how successful we are in attracting this federal interest subsidy money, that will determine what our the balance of our debt, annual debt obligations are, and we'll of course be working with the Finance Committee to determine how that is best addressed. But I'm not aware of any decisions being made on operating dollars in FY17, nor has that been discussed. We're just working on the FY15 budget right now.
Well, I'm missing something, because in this presentation, it shows very clearly that without the subsidy, there would be a $228,000 deficit in terms of the debt service minus the annual savings would result in $228,000 is not covered in FY 2015. And if we get the full subsidy, it would be $102,000. And then there's some question as to whether there's additional maintenance charges on top of that. So that would indicate to me that there's at least $102,000 that will need to be funded out of the operating budget for FY 2017. And as we've already discussed, we haven't decided how that would be allocated between the school departments and the town. So since the town has about 1/3 of the projects, and the schools have about 2/3 of the projects. I guess you could say that it might be split that way. The energy savings are about the same. But there is definitely going to be an impact on the budget. Now, how we fund that has not been determined, right? That could be funded through a variety of creative means, but there is a definite going to be an impact because the energy savings don't float the boat. And that's my concern. And so things get a lot better with the subsidy, but it still doesn't mean that we have any freeboard.
Again, I think we said the same thing. We're in agreement. Nothing has been determined for FY17. There will be some additional costs for debt service, and it needs to be determined how those are appropriately allocated. There's much to be done yet in terms of final calculations on energy savings, and those are very premature at this point. But at the end of the day, our choices are, how do we want to finance these important capital needs? Do we want to go to the taxpayers, pay a higher cost for them, have no potential for interest subsidy, and do it with an override, or do we want to try and live within our means? And I understand that if we live within our means, it requires that we work together in a disciplined manner to do everything within our power to make the taxpayers' dollars go as far as possible. And I can just tell you that from my standpoint as town manager, I'm committed to that. And I look forward to continuing to work in partnership with the school committee, our colleagues on the school administration side and the finance committee to seek that out. I think that is a directive given to all of us. But there are no easy answers. It's about working hard every day and finding out the best way to work on behalf of the taxpayers.
So I'm curious, just to follow up on what you just said about it would cost more if we went to the taxpayers. Would it cost more because you're counting on getting the subsidy?
It would cost more for two reasons. One, you have no potential for this subsidy that's been talked about. And number two, a standalone, those of us who've been through this on multiple occasions know that if you go with a standalone procurement process, which this town and the school have done in the past on a number of projects, you have no economies of scale, your costs are higher, and your procurement is higher. So the costs you pass through to the taxpayers by either a debt or capital exclusion are higher costs at the end of the day. And one of the beauties of an ESCO, as recognized by the state statute and as evidenced by the multiple towns and school districts that have utilized it, is that you have better cost containment and higher quality projects at the end of the day and a better value for taxpayers. So those are the things that I find compelling.
So I'm trying to just basically understand this, and I'm not sure that there's economies of scale when you're talking about a roof or talking about windows at Lawrence School, but so I've tried to make a chart here in front of me. You know, if we do it through ESCO, if we don't do it through ESCO. And if we do it through ESCO, we go to town meeting. If we don't do it through ESCO, we go to the voters.
And a town meeting.
And town meeting. If we go through ESCO, if we don't go through ESCO, it's not part of the operating budget. If we go through ESCO, it might come out of the operating budget.
Correct.
We don't know yet. If we go through ESCO, there's a possible subsidy, and we'll have an answer in about 10 days.
We hope to have that answer in 10 days, yes, sir.
And is that a 1-year subsidy?
No, that's for the 19 years that finance
So once the
directors
decision
commented
is
on.
made, the decision is made.
Jennifer, do you want to comment on that further? The QSEB, if we're fortunate enough to be awarded the QSEB, how many years that continues?
Well, we've applied for the 4 million, so it would continue for the 19 years, the reimbursement on the interest.
And if we go through ESCO, we do everything through train, but if we don't go through ESCO, we go through the bid process.
Go through the bid process individually on each and every project as a standalone, and that's where you lose your economies of scale. You have to design
Again,
each project.
I'm not sure there's economies of scale when it comes to bidding a roof or bidding all the windows at the Lawrence School.
When it's bid as a package by a company like Train, my experience is there are economies of scale, and they're demonstrated We've heard about that from multiple towns and school districts.
The superintendent and then Mr. Patterson.
Thank you. I would just like to say on behalf of us that obviously, just as Julian said, we're appreciative of the work that has gone on before our administration here now, and certainly also want to work collaboratively with all of the town boards. And you know, we had the meeting prior, we had a good feeling about this. Our concern, just as Mr. Patterson said, comes up later on. So we just want the town people to know that unlike other departments sometimes, there are issues that come up, such as our students' needs that come out of the blue, if you will, and can be $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 in 1 year that are unaccounted for. So we certainly appreciate the work that has gone on. We want to work collaboratively with all of, can't get that word out tonight, with all of the boards, but just again note the concerns that we have going forward and how this might impact the operational budget, and hoping at that point that we continue to work collaboratively again, and that's the third time. But just want to echo that we do have those concerns, but certainly want to work with our colleagues.
I just want to say that I have nothing against the ESCO approach to funding these projects. I think the justification makes sense. I mean, I've been on a number of building committees in the town. Fortunately, the ones I was on all came in within budget. But I've seen the number of mistakes that we have made as citizens in trying to manage these projects. See some bad choices come back to really haunt us. So I don't have any qualms about turning it over to a quality company to manage these projects, because I think they probably can do it much more efficiently, especially under the ESCO. My problem is how we pay for the cost that we will bear. And I think we have to look long and hard about taking it out of operating budgets. Maybe that piece should be put out to voters as a debt exclusion, so we reap the benefits of efficiency and reduce the cost of a debt exclusion to that goes over and above the operating budget. So I would just throw that out as a third option here that we should be taking a look at.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's on. I just wanted to say that I think this has been a really excellent discussion. And as the town manager has said, and Heather as well, that this project has been looked at by the Board of Selectmen for at least the last 2 years, if not longer. And the whole idea is to really find ways to reduce our energy costs, because we know that no matter what we do, the costs are going to accelerate. They're not going to stay the same year after year. They are going to go up. And anything that we can do from a town perspective to plan to have a way to reduce those costs in the future is beneficial. I think we've heard a lot of benefits to engaging ESCO to take on this project for us, and there have been some potential drawbacks, and that's always the case. The benefits, the detriments, the good points, and those that we have to maybe be concerned about in the future. And I know also there's been considerable discussion about this whole idea of maybe in the future having to take it from the operating budget. And we all have maybe different ideas of what the operating budget really is. And so to some, it's the monies that are allocated to the departments to do their jobs, which is actually the operating budget. But there are other pieces to the operating budget as well, one of which is free cash. So I think we have to be cognizant of the challenges that will face us in a couple of years. But the other thing is, if we do nothing to improve our infrastructure, then we really have not done our due diligence either for the town and for the citizens of the town. And I think this is an opportunity that presents itself to the risks, I believe, from what I have heard tonight, are minimal compared to the benefits. And I think it certainly takes on our important responsibility to manage our infrastructure, to maintain our infrastructure. And so I would suggest that it is a good project, and I would hope that each of the boards here tonight would consider it favorably. Thank you.
Last
One
comments?
more thing. Yeah, I'd just like to point out that it's not necessarily the case that the ESCO projects are going to be less expensive. In talking with people, they said, oh, well, because we get to do the bid, they bypass the bid laws, the labor rates will be cheaper. Not necessarily true. Dave Ward, when I spoke with him a couple days ago, said that it probably was very comparable in terms of labor. But there is definitely an incentive for Train to mark things up and to escalate pricing. So, and they can do that in a variety of ways. One of them is by just over-specifying what we may need. And it's difficult to know whether that's going to be the case, whether they're doing that to us. So it's in their incentive to make things be a little bit more expensive than they perhaps could be. And this has been a concern that, again, I've heard about from some people that are in the industry, that this is a common thing that happens. So while we may get a great interest rate, especially if we get the full subsidy, it doesn't necessarily mean that the overall, you know, if we're overpaying for the work, the interest rate isn't such a big deal. So I think, and that's what I get concerned about, is what the transparency is on whether we're really getting a good deal on this. And so I don't have a lot of information as to what that is, but if we go back to 2010, we passed an override in the spring. It passed pretty easily. I think it was, well, relatively. 56% of the voters voted for it, for the North Falmouth and the East Falmouth school roofs. The other two provisions failed, but that one passed, because I believe voters will vote for roofs. But my point is that those cost $650,000 to do those two roofs. What we have on here is $884,000 to do the Morse Pond roof. I'd love to know what the numbers are per square foot, sort of get some comparables. And the numbers we have from the ESCO are not final, I understand that. But I do think you need to think about it more as what's the actual value of the work that we're getting, and not just be taken in by the potential low interest rate that we would pay on the bond. Thank you.
I'd like to try to wrap this up, folks. It's about 8:30, and we still have other items on the agenda.
Just one comment, Mr. Chairman. I just want to be careful we're not frightening taxpayers into thinking that somehow under this ESCO costs are totally out of control, unbridled, not reviewed. Of course, Mr. Ward, who we've already introduced, is the town's consultant in this area. He's going to very carefully and thoughtfully, as he has already indicated, look over all the contracts we have with Train, look over their numbers, look over all the percentages. He's being paid to do that. He is the town's advocate. This is part of the nature of the ESCO process, and I don't want to leave it implied in any way that there's any irresponsibility in the way the costs will be managed or articulated or reviewed. They will be scrutinized considerably, and that is Mr. Ward's job. He's highly qualified, and we're certainly going to hold him to that.
It's important, I think, to paint the picture in a more accurate way. You can draw the same types of conclusions about a more conventional procurement process. And some of the things that are happening in an ESCO, or would happen in ESCO, are correcting measures that were implemented under conventional permitting. For example, you may have a boiler or a fan or a motor in a particular building, and this is the case in some of our facilities, where it's oversized and working for you 24 hours a day, oversized. And you're paying for that every day, 24 hours a day. What the ESCO does is place the right sized equipment in there. It may be a higher upfront cost for the right capacity motors and fans, but over the life of the project, you will pay less for it. And so there, you can look at the project under one lens or in another lens. It really depends on really having good consultants that know the facilities, have spent the time in the facilities, and know what the payback is on the equipment, both from energy and dollars.
I'm going to wrap this up, folks. There's going to be more opportunity on town meeting floor, obviously, because we do have the article, and there will also be, I imagine, some more discussion amongst the Finance Committee as they work to develop their recommendation, and hopefully amongst the school committee as well, as they look at potentially presenting a recommendation to town meeting. I know this board will probably we may have our own discussion as well. I wanted to thank both committees for joining us this evening, and if you do have further questions, I'm sure the town manager's office can help you out with that. I think we're ready to adjourn this section of our meeting. We will take a 5-minute recess while we reorganize. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The board is returning from a recess after our joint meeting with the Finance Committee and the School Committee. The next item on our agenda are the announcements and proclamations. We have an announcement from FACES. Is there a representative here from that organization? Please come to the microphone, identify yourself for the record.
Good evening. My name is Tina Cormier, and I'm here representing the Falmouth associations concerned with estuaries and salt ponds. Handing out a few materials for you to look at. You can keep those, and I have a few posters for your review as well, but we'll need those back. So I'm here tonight to just let you know about a project that we have going on called Falmouth Keep It Blue Stormwater Education Campaign. And we're working with FACES volunteers, the DPW, and AmeriCorps Cape Cod, and we're funded by Cape Cod 5 and the Quebec Labrador Foundation's Sound Conservancy. And the project is basically to raise awareness about stormwater runoff into our ponds, estuaries, beaches, and saltwater ponds, freshwater ponds. So we're putting together educational kits, which is some of the materials that you're looking at now. And we are hoping to put up some posters at the beaches and ponds, and I've given you some examples of those as well. The issue that we're trying to address here is that stormwater runoff accounts for 10 to 15% of our nitrogen pollution in our ponds and estuaries. And we're just trying to educate the public on ways that they can take action to reduce their stormwater runoff footprint by putting together these educational kits and putting up posters at the beaches and ponds, and hopefully in the town buildings and in any other buildings that we can in town. So I'm here tonight to request permission to put up posters at the beaches and ponds, and also to let you know that the beach department has voted in favor of these posters at all Falmouth beaches, and Chuck Martinson has also agreed to allow us to put up these posters at the ponds. And again, we're just hoping to put them in the town buildings as well.
Questions from the board?
I don't have a question, but I think what you've put together is terrific.
Thank you.
And how did you come up with that kind of catchphrase of keep it blue?
I believe we may have borrowed that from the, I think it says it at the bottom of the poster, sort of inspired by some materials that we found in Washington. But yeah, we're very excited about this, and we're hoping to sort of roll this out very soon, put the kits together and sort of target some neighborhoods for delivery for these.
Any other questions from the board? All right. Thank you. And
Thank
you need
you.
the posters back, correct?
Just the posters. You
Okay.
can keep the others.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Briefly, I'd like to announce some committee vacancies. We have vacancies for the Affirmative Action Committee, the Board of Assessors, the Bikeways Committee, the Building Code Board of Appeals, the Buzzards Bay Action Committee, the Cable Advisory Committee, the Cape Light Compact, the Coastal Management Committee, the Conservation Commission, the Council on Aging, the Cultural Council, the Design Review Committee, the Commission on Disabilities, the Finance Committee, Historic Districts Commission, Historical Commission, Human Services Commission, the Retirement Board, the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, the Substance Abuse Commission, the Town Building Committee, the Transportation Management Commission, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. Anyone interested in filling one of these positions for us, please come into the town hall, the town manager's office, fill out an application, and we'd be happy to consider you. Do we have any other announcements from the board or the town manager's office?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right. And with that, the next item on our agenda, we have the summary of actions.
Mr. Chairman, before we go to the summary of actions, I'd like to disclose I'm the holder of an all-alcoholic seasonal liquor license. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. I'll read through these. If anyone would like to hold them, please let me know. Appoint Heather Harper as alternate board member to the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group. Request for a beach wedding permit.
Hold.
Request for one-day liquor license, Woods Hole Public Library, November 2, 2013. Change of Sunday hours, Family Ventures Incorporated, doing business as Jimmy Brown's Cafe, 339 East Falmouth Highway, East Falmouth. Okay, so we're holding items 2 and 4.
Move our items 1 and 3 for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for items 1 and 3. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? It's unanimous. Ms. Moffett, you held number 2.
Yes, the one that I am thinking about at Minot Beach on the 28th of June, I noticed that there was a comment whether that is going to be the beginning of the summer and our beaches are open, and I think maybe we need to know that, and what other activities are going on near the Minot Beach. So I have the 2 questions concerning when are our beaches open, and I believe they need to use our beach at 5:20, and they are going to be parking vehicles, and when do the beaches open for the summer?
I think the Board of Selectmen has a policy that allows any weddings even during the summer season after 4 p.m. So it's within our Selectmen's policy, even if the beaches do in fact, even if they're open.
Well, and are there other activities? That seems to be my other thought, is that sometimes we have other activities that happen at the same time. They coincide. So if that isn't any kind of a problem for anyone else, it is certainly something that I'm concerned when we double book, so to speak.
As far as I know, we don't have any double booking at this point in time, and I think with the attention we're given to the events, I don't think we'll run into that.
Mr. Chairman, may I make one comment? Just to confirm, certainly Selectmen's questions are well placed, and we did hear from Beach Superintendent Don Hoffer that and I think this is what Selectman Moffett is referring to. This may indeed be the opening of the 2014 beach season, but as indicated, it is later in the day when the board's policy would normally allow that. And Don Hoffer goes on to indicate that he believes in any case there would be room for 25 cars in the lot at that time of day in the adjacent parking lot. So for that reason, he does recommend that the board consider favorable action on this.
Okay. How would the board like to proceed?
I move approval of it, but also to point out that we have not set the fees for 2014, and so the applicant may have a different fee that they have put in already.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? It's unanimous. And Ms. Moffett, you held item 4.
Yes, I think there's a request to open on Sunday and to have beer or wine or alcoholic beverages served earlier than noon. And I'm not sure they're calling it a buffet, but does that just simply mean that anyone that comes into the restaurant can just have drinks and doesn't have to have the buffet? So I believe there's a reason why we have our restaurants opening and the alcohol served at noon, and I'm in disagreement with it being changed to earlier in the morning.
As far as the hours, that is at the board's discretion, and I think, and perhaps Mr. Murphy is more familiar with the law, but I do believe that we cannot, establishments cannot serve drinks buffet style. That would be technically an open bar, I think, and they have to pay for each individual beverage.
Well, excuse me then, if I didn't, I'm saying that if you are going to order beer and wine, is that because you are there for the buffet? That's my point.
a few years back, the state changed the blue laws and allowed alcohol to be served in establishments before 10 a.m., pardon me, before noon, at 10 a.m. on Sundays. I believe, and I was not on the board, but the board established a policy that those establishments that wanted the 10 a.m. license merely write a letter and ask for that license. We have very few restaurants in this town that in fact have the 10 a.m. license. Again, I had already made my disclosure. I'm not one of those, but it's not a requirement of the law that they have to serve food at those at 10 a.m. Typically, licenses are 8 a.m. till whenever the license closes. In this case, it was never able to do it before noon. The state has now changed that to 10 a.m. They're just merely asking for the 10 a.m.
Okay.
Not like the old days.
How would the board like to proceed?
Make a motion to approve.
Second?
Well, we have a motion and a second to approve. I don't think that this is technically a hearing, so it's simply an extension of the license. So we're not going to take public comment on this at this time. Motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Okay. Motion carries 4-1 with Ms. Moffett voting against. And that dispenses with the summary of actions. The next item on our agenda, the minutes of the October 7, 2013 public meeting.
I have a couple of corrections, and I know our recording secretary is not here this evening, but on page 2, the second group down, it's Beth Colt, owner. It's not, it's Holt on the minutes. And then there are 3 aquaculture licenses. There is a mention of my disclosure in 2 of those licenses. I disclosed in all 3 of those. So in the 3rd aquaculture license for Daniel Ward, it should be noted that I disclosed that I own a restaurant that serves shellfish.
It's mentioned.
Okay, it is further down in the point.
Yeah.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay.
I move the minutes with that correction.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
A motion and second to accept the minutes as corrected. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Unanimous. All right. And per the board's request, we have a briefing on the NSTAR Vegetation Management Plan. I believe we have a representative from NSTAR as well as Ms. Kelly who wanted to provide an opposing viewpoint. Mr. Galvin from NSTAR? Ah. All right.
We have a request from the audience. If you guys could use your microphones, that would be great, because can't hear the back there.
We'll try to raise our voices a little bit. And also, you folks in the audience, we did move some chairs up here closer. You don't need to be so shy. We're not going to bite.
I'm wondering if it'd be all right with the board if my friend Amy just records me, not anybody else.
Is this audio or video?
Is it video? She sat here
It's
and
video.
just
If she
got
could
me.
come to the microphone and ask permission, it's state law, under the open meeting law. Video recordings must ask permission of the board.
I'm asking on her behalf if I can videotape her.
And you are?
Oh, Amy Guthinger.
Okay. Any objections from the board?
Sorry.
Oh, could you spell your name, please, for the record?
Last name, Guthinger, G as in George, Uthinger.
Thank you. Granted.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing this situation tonight. I really appreciate the special request this evening. Hello, my name is Laura Kelly. I am of Northeastham. I am a land designer specializing in native vegetation and custom stonework. I've become the Green Initiative Consultant for Provincetown and wish to continue to educate other towns and residents that work with nature. We can create sustainable systems that are cost-effective and less harmful for a cleaner future. I noticed many flyers and brochures in your town hall the last time I was in town, and I just want to say thank you for your dedication. It's obvious that you guys really care about
quality of drinking water. I just wanted to bring us all kind of in the same page here, and what is done in one area of Cape Cod affects all of us. We consume water from the same table of water. So this is about NSTAR and their use of 5 different types of herbicides on power lines for vegetation overgrowth. NSTAR is mandated by the state of Massachusetts to maintain vegetation overgrowth along 150 miles of power lines on Cape Cod. But they are not mandated to use herbicides to complete this task. It is their choice to use herbicides. Personally, I love NSTAR. I'm addicted to electricity, and first to admit it. So it's not anything like about that. It's just that I don't want them using herbicides to keep lights on. You know, there is other effective ways that are cost solutions available, so both sides can come together and take good care of our land. I've seen NSTAR's VMP, that's the Vegetation Management Plan, the last 5 years, and I think it sounds really good. They speak of spraying, targeting only plants that may become large enough to take down electric wires. They speak of using less and less herbicidal applications over time. That sounds really good. I agree. I just don't see it working out that way. Throughout the years, NSTAR has mowed successfully, yet each time you cut certain plants back, you end up stimulating more growth, creating large root systems, which grows more suckers. So yes, we want NSTAR to maintain vegetation to protect our electricity, but in using herbicides to do so, it will kill living organisms essential for plant life. In my eyes, it is okay to maintain vegetation above ground without harming anything below the ground in the process. We live in a big sandbar, so it is especially necessary not to harm our drinking water. Where's the tipping point? We really don't know. Over the past 2 months, I requested to be on the agenda of the Board of Selectmen for all 15 Cape Cod towns. At this point, 14 towns have written, in their own words, a document they signed stating they do not want NSTAR to spray this year or beyond on Cape Cod. The town of Dennis writes, the top few inches of soil on Cape Cod is living, breathing, life-sustaining. Living soil is responsible for filtering our entire water supply on Cape Cod. Living soil retains carbon, thus reducing the effects of global warming. Native small trees and shrubs provide cover for living soil. The trees and shrubs release clean oxygen into our atmosphere. In the past, NSTAR has demonstrated responsible and sustainable management practices regarding power line easement with selective cutting and mowing. These practices protect the soil's capability to filter our water rather than kill it by the application of pesticides and herbicides that leach into our finite water supply, toxins that harm the health of residents along with native plants and wildlife species. So far, what I feel is missing in NSTAR's vegetation management plan is there is no capped amount of herbicides that they can use. There is nothing in writing stating which mixtures they will be using. There's 5 different herbicides plus a petroleum-based surfactant, and they say they're going to use combinations of them, but they're not listed. There is not a limit to the number of times they can spray per year. At this point, they can tap into fire hydrants and fill up their trucks with mixed herbicides, and there is the possibility of backwash. There's nothing stating that they will only clean their trucks in hazardous chemical areas as well. This is a very loose proposal, if you ask me. It doesn't make me feel comfortable knowing these things are not in writing before they start spraying on November 4th this year. NSTAR relies on the state of Massachusetts approval for the use of herbicides. That data is the herbicide tested by itself. And the state of Massachusetts relies on 30-year-old data from the manufacturer. I'd like to ask NSTAR to fund a third-party testing on sandy soil to prove there is no harm in mixing herbicides. Considering we live in an area that is proven to be high cancer rates, why do we want to add more to the mix? Especially when, in this case, there are other options that are successful. Considering we live above our sole source aquifer and many other communities, there's other committees and organizations that are working diligently to protect and preserve. Why should NSTAR be allowed to hinder their work? How does this make sense to fix water issues we know will cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to clean up, and then allow spraying of herbicides in places where there are alternative solutions? This is a well-defined risk. The power of our utility is possibly threatening our health. Cape Cod should be exempt from all herbicidal applications now and forever. Granted, homeowners are allowed to use some of these herbicides currently. That doesn't mean we should allow more on our sandy soil. In a time when we are talking about reducing fertilizers on Cape Cod, thanks to the help of the Cape Cod Commission, we are discussing the 208 wastewater plan as well. We're working towards lessening nitrogen and assorted risks in our drinking water. We're coming together as a community to find ways to protect natural resources here. We plan to educate residents and businesses as well that they're impacting drinking water. In the meantime, we must advocate the precautionary principle in this situation. If you could use non-chemical means for this area, why wouldn't you? Herbicides are an unnecessary risk for our soil biology and ourselves. Even though NSTAR says it costs less to use herbicides to maintain vegetation, it far outweighs the safety of residents, right? On NSTAR's environmental policy, it reads clearly, continually seeking opportunities to prevent or reduce pollution, conserve water resources, and use eco-friendly products and services. Well, in this case, let's do it. My first choice is what's called radiant heat weeders. And it's managing without the use of herbicides. Canada uses this successfully, so I'll pass this to you guys and can read it later. Basically, it's a kind of a sprayer that has a form of heat that, with the moisture inside the plant foliar, it makes it kind of explode and wilt, and it's almost an instant. It turns into food for microorganisms in the soil biology. We are asking NSTAR to become the leaders in helping to reduce the impact of herbicides on Cape Cod. We realize some of the herbicides NSTAR plans to use are on the shelves in locally based stores, but NSTAR will be introducing new chemicals to Cape Cod that are not allowed in public hands. NSTAR, please decide on your own to refrain from using herbicidal applications, and you will be looked up to as heroes if you do. Now is the time to get involved because we live here and we are the stewards of Cape Cod. Currently, this is a comment period that NSTAR has allowed us to do, so please do comment until November 1st, or feel free to go to www.pocacapecod.org for more information. So thank you, Board of Selectmen, for doing all you can in your power to keep our lights on without herbicidal use to do so. And thank you, NSTAR, for taking these considerations and concerns really seriously. Please allow a time and place to discuss alternatives to herbicidal use for Cape Cod. As we have educated each other for the past 4 years, I look forward to working with you on this through the seasons of time. Thank you very much.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Murphy?
I just have a couple. Number one is POCA. Is that an established organization in the state of Massachusetts, or?
Just about, yep. We're filling out forms for a 501c3 currently, yep.
So you're not yet?
Not yet.
Okay. And how many folks are currently in your grassroots to make this an organization?
Oh gosh, good question. Close to 100. There's members, there's advisory boards, we have a lawyer.
Okay, and you make a lot of references to sandy soil. You do realize that different parts of the Cape, there are different soils, specifically further down the Cape where you're mentioning in Eastham and things of that nature, the soils are much more sandy, where our soils tend to be, with the exception of near the waterfront, clay and
Right,
things,
there's
hard
pockets
packed
of clay
soils.
around, yes.
Right, so you realize that just we are one aquifer, but we have a very diverse Cape Cod.
Their original plan 4 years ago stated, I believe it was 4 or 6 inches of organic matter was what they were saying would filter through, and we let them know we live on, I still call it a sandbar, because there are patches of clay, agreed, but it's not consistent.
Okay, and another question, you said like 3 or 4 times, in your opinion.
Well, I'm not a scientist.
Okay,
Is anybody in the room a scientist?
Okay, I was just
I'm
asking
not.
that, that's why I'm...
I do refer to a science lab in France for the past 2 years, and they have been doing studies on especially one of the herbicides called glyphosate, and they're really proving that when you mix glyphosate with another herbicide, it becomes 100 times more powerful, so not just killing the plant cell, which is what it's made to do, but it kills animal cells and human cells as well. So the problem with time is this is happening now, but in order to get reviewed, actual tests documented, it takes up to 6 to 12 years, I've been told. So there's a gap where we should, be the stewards here and take care of our land.
Okay, so in your presentation, you mentioned that they're only supposed to be herbiciding plants that could come in effect or could affect the power lines themselves. Would you say that maybe this is an enforcement issue versus other low-lying plants? That's my question. I know what the order, you're the one that told me what the order is. So where do you think the problem is if those are the only species that they're trying to?
So what they're doing is they're targeting the species that will grow above, I'm believing, a 4-foot height. So like lowland blueberries would be great. Unfortunately, the combination of these herbicides mixed together, the plant will get absorbed, go out through its root system, and the soil biology is killed. So the neighbor plants will be, even if they're only the 2-foot, low bush blueberries that we want to keep, are going to be affected. So in some areas, in an acre, they might spray 3 times. It just depends. Another acre, it might be the whole thing. So it's different in every town, for a variety of plants.
All right, and then one other thing that you said was, you mentioned that if we mow the plants, it won't be quite as good either because it would make the plants stronger?
So what happens, if you cut something, it stimulates growth. So in cutting things back, the root system is still there, but you took the load off, let's say, all the big vegetation, the roots are still growing. It stimulates them. So the next time they're up, they're not just 5 shoots, there might be 10 shoots. They're called suckers. And so in mowing year after year after year, this is, what's been going on out there.
So your suggestion is the one and only one to clear these rights away is this new heat process?
Well, I can't say it's the only possibility. I'm just saying that's my first choice. There are many things. Goats would be a great way, which then you can gain from it as well. It's fertilizer, and you can gain milk and cheese, etc. So it's not hard. There are other counties that absolutely use goats as success, and Google it sometime. There's tons of stories.
In these long, small right-of-ways, they use goats?
Absolutely, yeah. I just tether them, and they circle. Now, I believe they don't eat a larger circumference of vegetation, so if you have a cambium or something larger than 2 inches, they won't go for it. But maybe the guy who's there herding them that day could hand saw it down. Last year, NSTAR did a really, a clear cutting from Orleans to the bridges to prepare for herbicidal applications. So things aren't really large right now at all. There's no emergency reason to go and spray in 2 weeks to make it through the winter. There's nothing going to be harming if we have nor'easters, and trees aren't going to fall down on electricity this winter. So if we could take the time to do more studies, if we could have a moratorium and ask NSTAR to test these herbicides together, then we would feel more comfortable if the test results come back that there is no problem. That's where I'm at.
Okay, I'm done with my questions, thank you.
I have quite a few questions. Maybe I can condense it. First of all, I thought your report was just perfect. I thought as I listened to every sentence that I was agreeing with you. And I think that the word pesticides is a little frightening, because I think we think of where we live on Cape Cod, and you say that word and it's going to be sprayed, isn't an issue that there is something on the ground and you insert a plug and no one knows. Spray goes into the air and into the soil. And it's not as if we live in a community that they call cement communities. And they have tall buildings and they have a lot of parking lots, and there's probably not much that they have to spray there. But we're on Cape Cod, and if there's 14 communities who have agreed to see if there's a moratorium, I certainly would not want Falmouth to be the one that says, no, let's just spray as much as you want to spray.
Thank you.
So I appreciate your report. I read it thoroughly. I went back and read it again. And I have circled and underlined, and you basically have answered all of my questions, because there has to be another solution to take care of any vegetation. And we also have that vegetation, and I can never say the name, and it's got 5 words, and it'll grow over a building and then down the highway, whatever. I say that wrong. But anyhow, I would be one to put up posters, and I recommend it, and I would say to this board, I'm very enthusiastic about your presentation and the fact that we don't need pesticides on Cape Cod.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Any other questions?
So was that a question? I guess at the end of it is oh, it is a question. Are we voting as in an agreement, a disagreement? We'd like a moratorium, or what is our...
The board can take whatever
We
action
can
it
take
deems
whatever
fit
action.
This evening. We still have to hear from NSTAR, so I would suggest we wait until we hear from...
still have to hear from NSTAR, and they're going to do that this evening?
Yes.
Oh,
Right
okay.
now.
All right, well, we'll see what they're saying then. Thank you.
I do have one question.
Sure.
You mentioned NSTAR doing tests on pesticides. So are you suggesting
Oh, that's the
that-
dream. No, this is, they're reliant on state. The state has testing from the manufacturer themselves that's 30-year-old data. 1978, I think it was, is what I've read. So if they have something new to show us and bring to the table, that would be great. But at this point, it doesn't make me feel comfortable relying on, Monsanto saying, yes, please use Roundup. There's no harm in this, from, long time ago. So the state approves herbicides, and NSTAR is working within the law, absolutely 100%. I'm not saying that they're not. I'm just saying that there is going to be something that's not, I call it a bomb to kill a mosquito. This is the heaviest piece of equipment we could ever possibly, just a little vegetation. It's, we can go out and hand prune this stuff, really, if it comes down to it. It's our land, and we should know what's going on in our own backyard. So thank you very much for holding this meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Galvin?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Dennis Galvam, Manager of Community Relations, and thanks for the opportunity of being here. I'm sure you folks must be pretty tired by now as well. I sat through a little bit of the earlier meeting. I'd like to thank Laura Kelly. I appreciate her passion. I've known her for 4 years, and she's acting in a way that she feels just, and I can only commend that. Someone else I want to mention as well is Sue Phelan of Green Cape. I think they do good work, and she too should be commended. NSTAR has been a part of this process in terms of the IVM program for the past 4 years. We've self-imposed voluntarily, a moratorium on treating because of concerns from the community. I remember the meeting. Nauset Regional High School, 2009. It was either late spring or early summer. Rather passionate meeting there, and the first time I saw Laura there, and I think it was a Monday night or a Tuesday night, and we were scheduled to begin treatment on Thursday. So nobody would have thought we would pull the plug 2 days, 3 days prior, but given the concerns and speaking with the town managers, the focus was Orleans, Wellfleet, Eastham. We did. We heard the concern. We didn't fully understand it. Why don't we take a step back? And that step back from 2009 has led us to 2013, 4 years later. And in that time, we have availed ourselves of the scrutiny of joining an ad hoc committee put on by Barnstable County, worked with the Cape Cod Commission, sat down in negotiations with Green Cape. So I would just want to, I guess, chronicle where we've been over the past 4 years, give you a thumbnail sketch, and I'm going to read it to you, if you don't mind. NSTAR voluntarily imposed moratoriums on spraying herbicides on Cape Cod beginning in 2009, and annually through 2012 due to concerns expressed at a public meeting by the community. The primary concern was the Cape sole source aquifer and the perceived possibility of these herbicides leaching into the water table. In 2010, NSTAR agreed to serve on Barnstable County's risk analysis of vegetation management ad hoc committee, charged with looking at herbicide-pesticide use overall, but with particular attention to NSTAR's IVM program. The committee included elected officials, Mass Department of Agricultural Resources, Cranberry Growers Association, Mosquito Control, the Mass Military Reservation, Green Cape, Concerned Citizens Against Herbicide Use on Cape Cod, the USDA, Cape Cod Landscape Association, the Cape Cod Commission, and more. Laura Kelly was also a part of that committee. After months of intensive meetings and presentations, the committee drafted a white paper and ultimately voted in support of the IVM program. Concurrent to NSTAR's involvement with the ad hoc committee, NSTAR engaged in negotiations with Green Cape. These negotiations were mediated by the president of the Environmental League of Massachusetts, George Bachrach. In the end, NSTAR proposed a number of measures, including a reduction of herbicide use over time and the collaboration of a Cape-wide educational program on herbicide-pesticide use with Green Cape. The Cape Cod Commission was to be a part of this collaboration. Unfortunately, the proposal was rejected, but I still have some hope that there's something that we can do. And Laura put a finger on it, that there's hopefully something that we can work on as we continue to move into the future.
Mr. Galvin, could you?
I'm sorry. Hopefully we can.
The board is your
work
audience.
together. Sorry. NSTAR partnered with the Cape Cod Commission in 2011. The Cape Cod Commission used AmeriCorps volunteers to assist towns in identifying wellheads along the rights-of-way due to perceived discrepancies in mapping. NSTAR purchased and supplied GPS units for the volunteers who canvassed the Cape's right-of-ways, assisting towns' records by providing a more accurate mapping of these wellheads. And to note, it is the town's responsibility to cross-check NSTAR maps with their own. The maps are provided in NSTAR's yearly operational plan. It was expressed by some towns that the needed cross-checking was not being done because of various reasons. So that leads us to the present. A couple of months ago, August, NSTAR conducted a briefing, a press briefing at the Yarmouth Service Center. We announced that we are going to move forward with our IVM program. At that time, the impacted communities, there are 8 on the Cape and 3 on the Vineyard, were communicated to the town administrators, town managers, apprising them of what was going on, as well as the environmental groups that we had been involved with. The yearly operational plan was mailed to impacted towns on August 5th. of 2013. Those communities are Sandwich, Bourne, Falmouth, Barnstable, Harwich, Chatham, Brewster, Tisbury, Edgartown, and Oak Bluffs, Orleans. I don't know if I left one out. And the Department of Agricultural Resources posted the YOP in their environmental monitor a couple of days after that, August 7th, which officially begins the 45-day comment period to September 20th. And in mid-September last month, the DAR extended that 45-day comment period by an additional 45 days, giving all the opportunity to respond and comment further. The second comment period terminates on November 4th. I know Laura had mentioned that we gave that, that additional time, but that was mandated by the DAR. Currently, NSTAR is awaiting the DAR's decision on the yearly operational plan. We're in the midst of the comment period, so towns, environmental groups, and so forth are responding within that comment period. To note, we are a heavily regulated business. The state is one of the most heavily regulated in the country on pesticide use. That's a known fact. And to note, too, NSTAR uses less than 1% of all herbicide, pesticide used on Cape Cod. This is public information and recently cited by the Cape Cod Commission in a draft report, which also cites the greater user, which is the citizen, the cranberry growers, golf courses, and more. Again, I appreciate the position and the passion from Green Cape and others who oppose what it is that we're doing. I know they feel as though that they're just in their position, but we too feel as though we know what we're doing. I'm not a scientist. I brought two of our senior arborists at NSTAR here to field some questions if there are questions. But we are, and this is countrywide, we are operating and knowing that this is the best management practice. And that's the label that the Integrated Vegetation Management Program has been given. We have environmental groups in support of the IVM program. We have pollinator groups that are in support of our maintenance program, our IVM program. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Mr. Jones, on your timetable that you projected, could you tell us what you have done since 2009? You've told us what you didn't do, that the moratorium was put in place so you no longer used herbicide. I imagine you must have done something to control the vegetation.
Something to control it? Well, we've done clear cutting. That's what we've done.
Right. In this town, last year you did some clear cutting, which it concerns me to say no to herbicide because the kind of clear cutting that NSTAR did last year had this town furious and in an uproar and doesn't want to give NSTAR permission to do anything because of the horrible treatment of the vegetation, of the neighbors, of the entire town. I'm concerned about that. You talk about 1% use. You haven't used any herbicide in the past 5 years, so your percentage is going to be pretty low if you've been using zero. I mean, how is it you have even 1% use if you haven't been using any in Cape Cod?
We have to apply to the Department of Agricultural Resources and to let them know what we're going to use. And just as cranberry growers do and so forth. And I can also bring up Bill Hayes, which I would like to.
In the projected, it would only be 1%.
No, this would be known fact. It has to be registered with the Department of Agricultural Resources.
Can't be fact if it hasn't happened yet.
Okay.
So there's
Let's give him a
If
chance
I could
to
bring
answer.
up Bill Hayes, he's our senior arborist, and he'd be happy to answer that for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
As Dennis stated, I'm Bill Hayes, senior arborist for electric transmission for NSTAR. I believe the study that came from the Cape Cod Commission was for the period of time that herbicides were applied on the Cape Cod. So it's not in the moratorium period, it's for the period before that when we were applying on the Cape.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I think the first thing I would think about what you just told us was a lot of technical information. And I was waiting for you to say, we have something other than a chemical pesticide to use, and I didn't hear it. I heard some political things. I heard what a lot of organizations you've talked to. I'd be very interested in knowing who the environmental group is that would agree with pesticides. But I didn't hear, I didn't hear you say how a situation that if we don't want pesticides, that hasn't been decided, but if we didn't, what you would do about that. And what I really wrote all over this page is a lot of organizations, a lot of people you talk to, the fact there's been a moratorium. What would you do if you couldn't use pesticides?
Okay, I'm going to use my left here, and I'm the community relations rep, and this is our senior arborist. So I'm going to let him answer that question. Thank
Wow.
So you're correct, there's a lot of political issues in that, and I think that's what this is boiled down to. The science behind it is well documented. It's in the manuals documented from DAR, the Vegetation Management Plan. This is the Vegetation Management Plan. It's not the most exciting read, but it does have all that information to answer all your questions in here. That also went through scrutiny and boards and review, and on the panel that discussed this vegetation management plan with us, there were representatives from all different types of communities, whether they be activists or environmentalists or academia, commercial, etc. So that's how the VMP gets reviewed for the scientific information that's in it. The yearly operational plan speaks to all the specific products we use and how we use them. It talks about the low volume foliar application. It talks about cut stump. It tells specifically which products are used, which are not. We do have choices, but that doesn't mean we use all 5 of them at the same time. And I think another thing that this speaks to is when we go down a right-of-way, we don't apply over and over and over again. We go down that right-of-way once, and then we may come back another 3 to 5 years. And so by design, reduce the use. Less chemical is used each time we go through that right-of-way. On the other hand, if we go through with mowers, they're using petroleum products, whether it be gasoline, diesel, etc. Each time we go through that, the parties before us were correct that keeps putting more and more sprouts, creating thicker and thicker targets that are going to reach our power lines. So the idea of a IVM program is mechanical control, chemical control, cultural control. And as you go through that cycle, you're reducing the stem density out there, less and less. As you go through with herbicide applications, there is less targets to apply because you've eliminated the root systems. You've allowed the native species to invade that area and take control. That's the cultural control part of it. As far as, I don't know if you want to call this an environmental group, but it's the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, and this is from Dr. French, Assistant Director. Although the focus of utility companies is on safe and efficient delivery of services to the consumer, many state-listed plants and animals and other declining species are increasingly dependent on early successional habitat conditions that results from careful right-of-way management. He goes on to say that many right-of-way managers combine mechanical management with spot applications of herbicides to effectively and efficiently manage problem vegetation and provide safe and reliable service to consumers. While mechanical vegetation management plays an important role, this technique alone is not always adequate, and in some situations can exacerbate problems created by invasive or woody species. The same concerns hold true for the management of early successional habitat for state-listed species. Mechanical methods alone do not always achieve the diversity of habitat features, and these species require, and therefore the targeted application of herbicides is often necessary for the creation and maintenance of certain early successional habitat features. In summary, The Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program believes that the method of vegetation management developed by utility companies with the Department of Agricultural Resources and the Natural Heritage Endangered Species Oversight, including the targeted use of herbicides, are both environmentally sensitive and necessary to maintain key habitats. So I would say that's a fair endorsement of the IVM program. Did I answer your questions, ma'am?
Not at all.
Okay.
I will say, I am waiting to hear how can you can accomplish what you need to do without pesticides that are eventually going to end up in our ponds. That's all I need to know. I need to know that of all the chemists and the scientists, and you're all working, why there isn't a product that can solve your problem and it does not harm our ponds.
And those are the products we're using, ma'am. So the materials that we're using them, this isn't, remember, NSTAR is an end user. Like yourselves are end users in this town using chemicals. We are regulated by the state, and they have come up, doctors, not arborists, they have come up with what products are safe and whether in sensitive materials areas or not. So what does a sensitive material mean? Those are the only products we use that are listed for sensitive materials areas. That means we can go into certain wetland areas and use those products, as many other groups do, including the state. We can go into zone 2s of water areas with those products. That's how confident the scientists are with this information. So we use that throughout our entire system. We can use other products that we don't have listed in our YOP. In the upland areas, we choose not to do that because if we keep it just to the sensitive materials, we use that throughout our entire system. We don't use those other products, which some may argue have higher toxicity issues. So, you know, when you use equipment, chainsaws, that's gas and oil. When you use mowers, skidder buckets, bucket trucks, that's all petroleum-based, you know, fuel to make that equipment do the job out there. So those residuals are out in the field. So I'll point out to you one thing here on a Louisiana State University pesticides for proper perspective. Some facts to help us keep toxic things in proper perspective. So toxicity is measured in LD50. So the higher the number, the more toxic it is. Table sugar, 29,700. Aspirin, 1,000.
Stop you right there. Somebody have a phone going or something back there? Could you please silence that or leave the room? Who owns that? Thank you. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Thank you, sir. So the reason I'm actually putting these numbers out there, when you talk about you know, the toxicity of things, you have to put numbers to them. You can't just say it's safe or it isn't safe. So table sugar, 29,700. Baking soda, 3,500. Aspirin, 1,000. Nicotine, 53. Gasoline, 150. Caffeine, 192. So the lower numbers, 192, caffeine, gasoline, nicotine, are more toxic than Roundup, glyphosate. Glyphosate is 4,320. Now these are just not my opinions, these are, you know, scientific facts. So it's just trying to put it in perspective. You know, one of the most toxic things in the environment is natural, Mother Nature, bacterium, botulinum. You know, a milligram of that pure toxin can kill 500 adults. Yet we use it for vanity purposes, Botox, etc. So it's a matter of moderation. So the dose makes the poison. Some things in very low doses won't do anything to you. At higher doses, they'll hurt you. And we use them every day. And so pesticides, to wrap your mind around that, is the same thing. When we're regulated, scientists have shown what is the proper mixes, what are the proper applications, where and what right-of-ways that we can use these products. And like many things we do every day, we trust professionals in their fields of expertise so that we can go about our day. And that's the same thing with our company. I, as an arborist, Paul Sellers as a distribution arborist. We are professionals, but we're end users. At the end of the day, Mass Department of Agricultural Resources, US EPA, Department of Environmental Protection, those are the folks that we're trusting that they understand the science behind that. In my 25 years of experience has demonstrated to me that I trust those folks.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. The previous speaker mentioned about how you spray. I don't know which one of you I would address. Is this on a sprayer truck, or is this backpack sprayers? Is it targeted spraying, or is it, for the lack of better terms, what Mr. Jones said, is it clear-cut spraying, meaning that you would go down the entire right away and spray everything?
So to answer that question, we're using backpacks, 3-gallon backpacks. The mixes in there is about 8% mixed in water. So 8% of that total mixture is water. Chemical, including the surfactants, adjuvants, besides the active ingredient chemicals. The remaining approximately 98 to 99% is water. When you go down the right-of-way, you have a backpack, and you go up to the specific target. So if I may approach, these microphones are the targets. And out here is all desirable species. We mowed it last year.
If you could carry the microphone with you, just that way the folks at home can hear.
I always wanted to do this. So as I go through this right-of-way right here, I see these targets, and these are stems of cherry, and they're only this tall. Or they're pitch pine on the Cape, and they're only this tall because last year we mowed them, right? So this is when we want to target them. We don't want them to grow 8, 10, 12 feet tall, because by law, we can't apply anything over 12 feet tall. So when we come up to this, I have a backpack on, I take the nozzle, and I spray it like that. Go up to this target, the same thing. As I go through the right-of-way, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for pine, cherry, oak, maple. I think most folks know what those are. So what are we also looking for? Viburnum, witch hazel, dogwood, hollies. Those are all species that are native on the Cape also. So what happens is I apply that. It might take 3 to 4 months before that plant is affected in order to kill it. It might be the next growing season when everything's sending to the meristems, to the growing points, and that chemical's uptaked into those growing points, the plant collapses. So what invades that? The grasses, the ferns, the viburnums, the blueberries. So you can see, next time I come, 3 to 5 years, there's birds, there's animals, whatnot, there's wind, plants get seeded in. Now of these 4, there's only 2. And then in another 3 to 5 years, now there's only 1. So you can see that by design, the use of pesticide is reduced because we keep eliminating those targets. Whereas if I come back every 3 to 5 years, these just keep multiplying, and I just keep mowing them down. So, I understand, especially on transmission, when, we go through a right-of-way and we're clearing for any tree that could, within our easement boundary, hit those transmission lines, and we're mowing them, and we're cutting with big machines, and it looks devastating thereafter. After time, and it's a time factor. You're seeing it at its worst. We'd have to keep coming back and mowing that over and over and over again. So it's a fairly destructive event. Necessary but destructive. Next time I come back with a mower, think about birds, animals. They're out in that right-of-way. Now, we can take precautions, but the fact of the matter is when you're in a caged machine and you put someone out in front of you, there's only so many things that you can see as far as nesting and whatnot. So when I go through there with a herbicide, we're not disturbing those. They may run off, they may abandon their nest and come back to it, but we're not destroying that habitat for them.
As a follow-up, when you mow, using your same illustration, Are you just going after those things, or do you have to take the other low-lying vegetation at the same time?
So, no, so if I have blueberry right at the base of this stem, and up here is the foliage, overwhelmingly, the top of the foliage is where the herbicide goes. If it goes past, and it can, down to the stem, there could be some spotting on the bottom. So right around the base of it, yes. But if I have blueberry where I'm standing, it's not affected. So now you have that sort of space where that blueberry bush can now invade it because that root stem is gone now.
No, my question is, if we didn't use herbicides, pesticides, and we only mowed, are we mowing everything, including those trees, meaning the other blueberries and things of that nature? Is that, yes?
Yeah, so effectively that's what we're doing, because a mower, a goat, whatever, a goat or a heat treatment is just another type of mowing. It doesn't do anything to the root system. So yes, you just keep destroying those same plants. Now some things like blueberry do benefit from a certain amount of either fire or mowing or whatnot to invigorate them, but not repeatedly over and over and over again.
Okay. All right. That's all I have for questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. In your publication we received on September 23rd, it's your notice about the comment period extension. You continually refer to herbicides. Does that mean you no longer use pesticides? Or you just didn't include those in this communication?
So herbicides are under the umbrella of pesticides. Okay. So fungicides, pesticides, insecticides, rodenticides, etc., are all under the umbrella of pesticides.
All right. Now, the other thing too is in your communication you talk about sensitive areas, and I'm assuming that those are areas under which there are drinking water wells. Is that what you refer to as a sensitive area?
Not necessarily, no. Okay. So sensitive areas is something from the state, so it's a term. It's not just, there's blueberry bushes there or honeybees or something. That's not a sensitive area by definition. So sensitive areas would be wetland areas. It would be in water well areas. So for instance, under DAR, private wells are identified within 100 feet of our right-of-way. We will not apply within 50 feet. That is the law. Public water supplies, there's different classifications, up to 400 feet away from public water supplies, so there's 100, 200, etc. We just go to 400. That way we keep it simple and don't try to delineate whether it's whatever type it is. So we go 400 feet away from that public water source. Where the sensitive areas come into play for some communities are zone 2s, So we are allowed by law to apply in zone 2s, which is outside of that 400 feet, with the sensitive materials list, which we use throughout the entire right-of-way, not just in sensitive areas.
I mentioned that because I think for us, and I would probably say that for many towns on the Cape, is that all of the area on the Cape is sensitive because we have a sole source aquifer, and all of our drinking water comes from the ground. So whether it's somebody's drinking water well or whether it's a zone of contribution or whatever it is, the entire Cape is a sensitive area because that's where all of our water comes from. And I wanted to mention too that it amazes me in a certain way that the state and the towns, they actually mow all of the grasses that abut state highways, state roads, and the towns with town roads. And I realize that there's a different type of perhaps vegetation that's growing on the rights of way, and I appreciate that. But in the last paragraph of the Cape Cod Commission's letter to you, their letter dated September 16th of this year, they say that while they understand your efforts in protecting the region's infrastructure and the intent of your IVM program, your vegetative management program, in order to provide more desirable plant species over the undesirable, thereby reducing the need for pesticide applications. I think the point is, what is your plan to actually reduce all of the undesirable vegetation or plants so that you don't have to apply pesticides at all? Is that a reasonable goal for you, or are we going to see? I understand that we don't have much say in the matter because the use of the pesticides are approved by the feds and also by the state government. So we can't really tell you not to do it at the local level, but we can surely do what we can to encourage you to have a goal of not using pesticides in the nearest possible date. How could you accomplish that?
How am I going to do that?
Yeah, how are you going to do that?
How NSTAR is going to do that? How Commonwealth is going to do that is shockingly by using herbicides. And the reason I say it that way is, again, the whole idea is to reduce the use, right? So, by using herbicides, again, we're out-competing those invasive species. That would be another thing that invades our areas when we mow, whether it be, a purple loosestrife or Japanese knotweed, etc., right? So if we keep mowing it, and Japanese knotweed's a great example of it, we keep mowing that down, it comes back thicker and thicker and thicker. So you're actually perpetuating that noxious weed or those invasive plants. When you use herbicides, you're controlling the root system of that plant, allowing the natives to invade that area. So in the end, that's how we're going to reduce the use. We're never going to go to zero using pesticides. If we keep mowing and mowing and mowing, that's going to keep invading and create more of those target species that are undesirable to us and the invasive species into that right-of-way. We were at that point not long ago on the Cape where we've had success in doing that, right? In Bourne, we went from a solid monoculture of pitch pine to native warm season grasses. It's fairly remarkable, so that's the land steward part of our program. We're out here to provide safe and reliable power, access, comply with all regulations, right? One of the great benefits, whether you're a forester or an arborist, is in the end you're a land steward, and at the end you're going to have that native habitat that you are bringing back at the expense of a monoculture of pitch pine.
Well, I realize too that birds and animals also bring the undesirable species and, along with them, they deposit the seeds and all of that. But I guess my question for you is, can you tell us what the pesticide application level was, say, 5 years ago in Falmouth to what it is today, or what you're planning to do? How much less pesticides have you used?
We do have information on, and we have to do that by law. We need to keep it for at least 3 years, but we have that information on how much we apply the first time, how much we applied the second time. And it's going down. And so on certain rights of ways, if we have not been able to get back to them, we've had to go back and mow and yet mow again. Well, now we're back up at a higher level, and we're going to have to apply, again with backpacks, to those plants. So there's going to be more product out there per acre than there was, say, in 2002, okay? But we're going to get back at that point in, say, 2018, 19, where we're down at the much lower levels. Now, realize we're already down at pretty small levels. We're talking about pints per acre. And when you try to imagine what an acre is, pints is pretty small when you're using a backpack. I mean, we got a 3-gallon backpack. That should tell you something, that you can't keep refilling that thing over and over again. So a person is going down that right-of-way, applying the microphones, right, and they keep on going. Well, they have a pony vehicle, an ATV, that comes up to those backpacks, put more pesticide into the mix, into the tank, and they keep on going. They do a right-of-way that's 13 miles long in 2 days. And when we go through and clear that, whether it be with harvesters or mowers or pruners, we're here for months. So that should intuitively say, there's less and less targets out there to apply, and we're using 3-gallon backpack mix. There's less being used.
Well, yeah, if I may, and this is my last comment, that's encouraging, but it's really not good enough. And we're now in the process of trying to get all of our residents educated and knowledgeable about the use of fertilizers and the problems that fertilizers cause to our groundwater. And pesticides are part of fertilizers. So I would really like to see NSTAR work on a program to absolutely define a point at which you could, through other means, eliminate the use of pesticides altogether. I think we have to do everything we can to protect our drinking water, and I don't think even 1% is acceptable.
So do appreciate that, and Cape Cod Commission going after that is outstanding. So, that 80% roughly of pesticides used by homeowners, a great place to start. And I think I heard it tonight, someone talking about storm drain runoff, outstanding. A lot of us live in this community. We may be NSTAR or Northeast Utilities, but we all live here. So, none of us wants our groundwater, our drinking water, to be harmed. I don't know anybody who would say that. So, I think what we're doing is a model to educate those folks. So a lot of those folks, they're certainly not licensed. If you go to the store and you're using Brush Be Gone to control poison ivy, which is triclopyr, more is better to some. With us, we've gone through the training. We're licensed by the state. We've continuing education credits, and we have resources to know what we're doing and go out. And the whole idea of IPM, integrated pest management, integrated vegetation management, is to reduce the use of pesticides. So we're already the model for that, best management practices, and that can help in the education process to the homeowner, who's the overwhelming user of pesticides.
In looking at the YOP, is it only 2 right-of-ways that in Falmouth is planned to be, the pesticides, or the herbicides planned to be used? Row 314 and row 304, I think?
There are 2 distribution lines, and Paul Sellers, our senior arborist, also handles the distribution of those IBM applications.
Paul Sellers, senior arborist, distribution, vegetation for NSTAR. And yes, 2 right-of-ways. The first is the 314 right-of-way, which is at the beginning of Sandwich Road, kind of comes across the Soares, behind the Soares flower farm back there. Goes down all the way to Carriage Shop Road, crosses down in the Bittersweet area neighborhood, goes through the Tony Andrews farm, crosses, is that Turner Road or John Parker at that point? And then goes, parallels kind of Sandwich Road, terminates at Brick Kiln Road. The other right-of-way is the 304 right-of-way, which comes out of Stevens Street, our substation, goes down the road and then jumps into the, off the road, and runs up to Falmouth Hospital, and then parallels the bike path. And that follows a bike path all the way down to Elm Road, where we have a substation there. Both of these right-of-ways, incidentally, have been treated in the past.
One last question. The town of Falmouth has a fertilizer application bylaw that was accepted by the state, and there's a period of time that we do not allow fertilizers. I believe it's March 1 to October the 30th. When would you be doing this treatment? What time of the year?
We'll be starting applications in the fall.
Would you be able to abide by that timing of that, to be able to coexist?
What was it, May?
I believe you can't apply from March the 15th to October the 15th, something like that.
It's October to March.
October to March. So the period would be October to March that you could apply.
So the short answer would be no, because we're regulated by the state, 333 CMR 11. So we do not fall under that bylaw for fertilizer.
I'm asking if you could voluntarily do it during that period of time, from October till March.
No, sir, because I mean, the majority of it is low-volume foliar, so it would be on the foliage of the plants. So certainly from that time period, most of the foliage is no longer on those plants. So then it would be then ineffective.
It's the exact opposite. You
Oh,
can't
right.
do it
Oh, I'm
from
sorry.
October to March in the fertilizer. March to October is when you're allowed to apply the fertilizer.
Right, March till October. Okay,
You are allowed
all right,
to.
okay. I had the dates wrong. So you could do it in that other period of time from March till October.
Yeah, they're really two totally different applications. They're not one and the same. So they really, the modes of action and whatnot do not marry up. So that's why, you know, when we go to NSTAR, it's a utility right-of-way category. You know, some of the same sort of products could be used in another right-of-way category or another category of application. You know, whether you're injecting trees for, you know, Dutch elm disease, or you're doing gall wasp or whatever, you fall under a different category. You know, if you're, you know, putting chemicals in water treatment facility, or you're doing, you know, glyphosate treatment on a school property, or whatever you're doing, those are all separate categories and fall under different parts of the pesticide program.
My understanding, I believe the reason March to October, and you know this better than I, is for nutrients, you want them to be used up by the plants as opposed to getting into the water as quickly. What you're doing is very different, and the other reason was for runoff that's more likely to happen during the winter months. When
Right,
the ground's
so fertilizers mostly are applied either by granular rotary spreader onto the ground, or through a foliar application with a hose onto the grass, which is also on the ground. So, you know, we're up top on the foliage. We're not putting it down on the ground.
Last questions? We've got to move this along.
I would, just very quickly, I would like to say that in the conversation and listening to you, there are some very bright minds I've been listening to. And would you please say to NSTAR to have some type of a resolution that it's not pesticides that is coming into our town? Because I think you can do it. And then we won't have that in our groundwater, and we won't have it in our ponds. And I think you're very bright people, and you can figure that out. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're not going to take public comment on this evening. This was for the board's edification, to hear both sides of this particular issue and to decide, for the board to decide if it wanted to take any action. I would like to take a moment and say a few things. I was on the Conservation Commission here in town for 4 years, and I don't know if the board is aware of it, but our own Conservation Commission, and I was a part of some of these decisions, actually approved the use of pesticides in wetlands in order to control certain invasive species. The reality is, and while it's a wonderful idea that we could say, okay, we're going to get rid of all the pesticides and call it a day, the reality is that managing vegetation is not as easy as saying there's something else out there. I'm going to venture to guess, probably a very good educated guess, that if there was something else out there that was better than this plan, we'd be seeing it already. There are costs associated with doing this. NSTAR is a public utility that is very heavily regulated by this state. They cannot set their rates without permission from the state. They cannot do things such as apply herbicides without permission from the state. If there was a way of doing this cheaper and more efficiently, I'm sure they would be coming to us and asking and telling us about it. The reality is that it doesn't exist, and I can tell you from experience on the Conservation Commission that yes, pesticides sometimes have to be used. I'd also like to point out to the board that we've spent an hour listening to these presentations tonight, and while I appreciate the desire of some members of this board to hear this information, I'd like to point out the fact that whatever we do or say here tonight is going to have absolutely no impact on what NSTAR does. We cannot regulate NSTAR. We have no jurisdiction whatsoever over their use of pesticides in the town of Falmouth. This is something that is regulated by the state. It is regulated by the EPA. And quite frankly, to be spending an hour of our time doing this is, in my opinion, a waste of our time. And if you folks would like us to continue to put these sorts of items on the agenda, that's all well and good. But we're going to be spending a lot of time, a lot of hours doing things which are going to do nothing for the people of Falmouth. I would suggest that if we want to accomplish something here, that we can encourage the people of Falmouth to reach out to not NSTAR, but to the state. Because it is really the state that regulates this situation. They've said it several times tonight, folks. The Department of Agricultural Resources is the controlling authority here. The EPA approves the use of pesticides, herbicides, and other chemicals across the country. Those are the organizations that have to be reached. We're not going to be able to get our work done if we spend hours and hours listening to presentations from organizations asking us to do things that, quite frankly, are not going to be given any attention by the state. That's my 2 cents in this situation.
I'd like to make a motion.
By all means.
Okay, I am using this from one of our other towns on the Cape to make a motion that NSTAR abandon its current plan to use herbicides along the rights-of-ways on Cape Cod and to commit to a no-spray, pesticide-free policy of the vegetation management on Cape Cod and the islands.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Murphy?
I don't want to belabor the point, but the bottom line is we have some alternatives here. You can continue to clear cut. We surely know what that has done to folks in this community. It is outraged folks. Or we can just merely try to take a conservative approach and use herbicides on the species that could potentially put folks in this community out of power. I don't have to remind this board what happened last winter in that devastating storm, how many days so many folks were out of power, how much grief that cost our citizens. We do have some responsibility here on this board to be able to do what we can within the means we can. Are we ever going to eliminate all of the risk in anything we do? No. There are no guarantees in this world except death, and I've said that before, folks. The bottom line is we can't guarantee that herbicides aren't going to cause some damage. But I'm sure as the progression moves forward and science moves forward, we may come up with another alternative. But in the interim, I think it's important that we take aggressive action at only the species that are invasive, only the species that are causing some problems. And the gentleman's right. For those of us who have a yard, occasionally we have to use an herbicide. And in that case, that's as simple as it is. But I don't doubt that there may be some minimal risk, but I don't think that that's an issue that we need to take that much of a stand for. I think they know. I think NSTAR knows that if they come up with a better solution to this problem, they're going to use that solution. So that's my 2 cents.
I'm very concerned about pesticides, herbicides, any fertilizer being put in our water, but I have great faith in Mr. Sellers, and I'm glad that he's a local representative who can be helping NSTAR do their best to take care of the town of Falmouth.
Anyone else? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion does not carry. Vote 3-2. All right. The next item on our agenda is a report on New Silver Beach betterment. That's fine. think I'm going to get up again, folks, so if
Oh.
any questions that the board may have, if we could just hold them to the end of the presentation.
You want to take a mic with you, Mr. Chairman?
No, I'm just going to, we'll allow the presentation to finish, and but I'm not going to be able to see no matter how I do this.
Are you doing the presentation?
No.
Good evening. I'm Jennifer Petit, the Director of Finance, and I've been asked to, thank you. I've been asked to report on some findings that I have seen when I first came into the town of Falmouth, and I was going over the debt exclusions from our financial advisor. And so I just wanted to report on the new Silver Beach project of a levy adjustment that we'll be making, and let me walk you through what I've found and how we would like to resolve that. The new Silver Beach SOAR project began in the 90s, and there were many authorizations, smaller authorization as this project came to fruition. And the final authorization was in November of 2006, and the total cost of the project was $9,425,000. Also in 2006, town meeting exempted 30% of the borrowing cost from Proposition 2.5, and they assessed 70% betterments to this project. And so the intent of town meeting is that they wanted 70% of this project to be covered by betterments, and 30% would be a debt exclusion over Proposition 2.5, and that was Article 30 of the November 2006 town meeting. And then in 2010, the project was completed. And when the project was completed, there were a series of forms that are filled out and submitted to the Department of Revenue. And there was an error made, and 100% was exempted in error rather than the 30%. So what does this mean? I want to assure everybody that the betterments were assessed correctly. There is no problem with the betterments. However, the town of Falmouth mistakenly assessed the taxpayers an additional 70% of the yearly debt exclusion for the past 4 years. So on this spreadsheet, and we'll make this presentation available to everybody on the website. So as you can see from the spreadsheet, in 2010, we exempted or excluded from Proposition 2.5 approximately $532,000. If we were to, we should have excluded the $159,000. So the difference was the $373,000. That year, we didn't use the 2.5, we didn't tax to the full 2.5% levy capacity. We left about $97,000 on the table, if you will. We did not tax, so we would make an adjustment for that. So in the last column, I have a total of the excess that was raised. And in 2010, and the total over the 4 years was approximately $874,000. And then after evaluating the project costs, because there were a lot of legal issues and legal payments, and also we had some abatement adjustments, so we want to adjust for that. So after adjusting for that, the total amount of the levy adjustment would be about $387,000. So as I looked at this project and I went through it, and I went through the debt exclusions and the actual bond payments and interest payments, I came to the figure of approximately $400,000 that we raised over Proposition 2.5 that we shouldn't have. So the question becomes, how do we make the taxpayers whole? Well, my recommendation would be that we have, just to assure everyone that the debt exclusions have been corrected, and we have put them into the budget, if you will. We have adjusted for them in FY14. The levy will be reduced by approximately $200,000 in FY14 and $200,000 in FY15. And so what does that mean? When we go to set the tax rate, instead of using the full 2.5% that we're able to tax, we will again leave $200,000 on the table. We won't tax the taxpayers in order to make this whole. So I'm proposing 200 and 200. We have contacted the Department of Revenue when we set the tax rate and we fill out what it's called a debt exclusion form. We've let them know what has happened and how we were going to fix this problem, and they have confirmed that no further action is required. So when this error occurred, we contacted the Department of Revenue and had a conversation, And they know that we fixed it moving forward, and, you know, we just wanted to let everyone know, you know, how we would definitely adjust for this moving forward. Any questions?
Well, I guess my question is,
Oh, sorry.
My question is, what is the process for returning that to the homeowners, those that overpaid?
When we set the tax rate, we'll have the tax classification hearing in a few weeks, excuse me. And when we fill out the tax recap, what's called the tax recap sheet, and we put, and really what it is, it's the final portion of the budget. And since we've had a reduction in, we've, you know, proposed our, we've proposed our budget and a reduction of state aid, there will be some capacity that will be able to, so we won't tax the taxpayers the full 2.5%. We will not tax them that $200,000. It's like, we won't bill them for it, so it essentially giving it back.
Okay.
We have some room in the levy that we can deal with this.
I just want to say that this issue came up under Jennifer's watch during my term as chairman, and it goes to show this community what a professional finance department can do. When Jennifer came in, she looked at not only things as we move forward, but everything that this town has had on its plate in the past. I take my hat off her for bringing this forward to you know, the town manager as well as ourselves, and even more specifically, working with the Department of Revenue, because they had to be a partner in this in the way that we needed to make the taxpayer whole as we move forward. So I think that having a professional department, having someone with the courage to come forward that there was a mistake in the past, and no one's here casting stones at who made the mistake or how it was made. The bottom line is that the taxpayer was hurt. The folks in New Silver Beach, individually, those betterment holders were not affected. Their betterment would have been the same, will remain the same. Moving forward, it was the taxpayers as a whole, and Jennifer came up with a solution to make sure that the taxpayers were given that money back, ultimately with a lack of additional taxation. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda, we have our budget policy statement.
I don't know if I'm able to speak on that.
We're not taking any public comment on that issue, thank you. I believe we have another presentation. I'm not going to try to turn around for this one. We've had some discussions about our annual budget policy statement, and there's some clarification here for the board. Ms. Petit?
Thank you. I came before the board 2 weeks ago and, with the town manager and recommended a budget policy for FY15. And some discussion came up about a particular part of the budget policy that I just wanted to give some more information and clarify this evening and come up with some options that might be available. I developed some slides. When I read last year's budget policy and then drafted this year's and presented it to the town manager and the assistant town manager, I wanted to, there's one thing I just really wanted to clarify. When we look at a budget increase of 2.5%, looks like we mirror that with Proposition 2.5 because we can increase our levy by 2.5% without an override or a debt exclusion every year. And when we calculate the budget, and what that 2.5 or 2.25% increase would be, we look at what was voted at town meeting, and I take out the debt exclusions, and it comes to about $106 million. And our tax levy, our FY15 estimated tax levy is $78 million. If you take the 2.5% on the $78 million, that's $1.9 million, and then we add in a factor of new growth. And the total revenue growth would be about $2.5 million. And a 2.25 budget increase is approximately $2.338 million. And what I'm trying to convey here is that as we grow the budget at $106 million, but we grow our revenue at $78 million, there's a little bit of a disparity. So with the 2.25% budget increase, it gives you a little bit of room. And this would be a plan A, if you will, and this is what we were discussing a couple weeks ago. And so the surplus would be around $168,000, and that's really that's what we're looking at. And I wanted to expand a little bit on the calculations that we did last year. So that would be Plan A in what I was discussing. Now, if we look at a Plan B, where we still take the estimated tax levy in 2.5%, and we still have the total revenue growth of about $2.5 million, and we have the 2.25% budget increase at about 2.3, and then we add an additional 0.25% of capital. That's approximately $277,000. And as you can see, there's a shortfall with all of the growth with the levy, and that's about $109,000. We appropriated last year to the Capital Stabilization Fund, just from the budget only, about $266,000. So this would have been in addition to that. And then I look at a Plan C, maybe a hybrid version, and we still have the same calculations and the budget increase. But now we want to really get back to the levy and what the levy increase is. So a 0.25% for capital, $195,000, that would be a 0.25% on the levy on Proposition 2.5 increase. And then we're right around, a break-even point, a little bit less, but, the budget is always fluid and changing, so that's really really a good plan, probably, moving forward, something that definitely would grow our capital and the town could handle. I developed some graphs just to show you visually of, what we just went over. I wanted to show you the figures, but I also wanted to show it to you visually. And this is the Plan A. As you can see, our budget growth, which is in the red, in 2014 to 2015, the budget growth was a little bit more than the levy growth, but in 2015 we get back, and the difference between the blue and the red is it really gives you some room. This is what's really creating, gives you the opportunity to create reserves within your budget. It gives you the opportunity to grow your undesignated fund balance, and it gives you the flexibility when you look at, the maybe a 2.25% budget increase versus tapping that out. So let's look at the Plan B. If we were to grow every year on our budget, you could see that the budget growth in the red of the blue, it's starting to really squeeze as we move up into even in 14 and move forward. And really, there you don't have the flexibility or really growing your reserves in the manner that we would like to see, according to GFOA standards, which I discussed a couple weeks ago. And so Plan C, and what this would do is, you see the blue and the red for FY15, it's about the same. And that would be appropriating from your budget about $450,000. And then, as you can see, as we get into 16 to 20, it gives you some room, but it will always keep that, not always, you can always change a policy, obviously, every year, but it will keep approximately $450,000 in your operating budget to be appropriated to the Capital Stabilization Fund. And I also wanted to demonstrate, not only are we putting probably about 450 with that policy of Plan C into the capital stabilization fund, part of the policy is putting 75% of your meals tax into the capital stabilization fund as well. And so what I did is I did this graph, and you have where you would be with your capital stabilization plan A, B, and C by FY20. And as you can see, with the blue and the yellow, you have a steady growth in there. And that's something that, right now we don't have a policy on which we would take it out, but you could see if we didn't take it out, that's where you would be in FY20. And that's what you really want to see, is you want to see steady growth. So Plan B, if we're rolling it into the base budget every year, would be unsustainable. It would compete with operating budget fixed cost increases. Your health insurance every year, you know, we talk about our health insurance increases, our retirement increases, and our wages, our negotiated union settlements. We want to fund the reserves adequately. That would, we wouldn't be able to look at it like we would normally want to look at it and have that flexibility to put some money into OPEB or stabilization. We still want to fund our general stabilization fund, which gives us, you know, really good solid reserve. And, you know, eventually might result in service reduction. Plan C would be sustainable for FY15. It puts, again, maybe $450,000 into your base budget, not including your 75% of your meals tax receipts. You're funding, we would be funding approximately $1 million per year into your capital stabilization, $570 from meals tax and about $460 from your operating budget. And really what this does is it retains the future options. And I also want to end with, when we look at the budget every year and we put the budget together and the town manager makes a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, and after meeting department heads and taking in the strategic plan into consideration from the board, you know, we look at see where we're at and what we can, you know, put away in our reserves. What can we put into OPEB extra other than the policy? And we want to try to maintain that flexibility, and this would definitely do that. And we also want to look, you know, at every year. It doesn't prohibit us from looking at what we'd want to put into capital stabilization if we wanted to put more than the $1 million, but it just gives us that flexibility as we enter into the budget process.
Question? I want to say that I've had some opportunities to sit down with the town manager and Jennifer in that period since our last meeting, and I'm quite happy with the way that the explanations were made. And just for the board's information, one of the scenarios that we're talking about is we've been discussing capital. And the good news is that we'll have the ability this year to put over $1 million away in the capital stabilization fund and Plan C, and still provide an opportunity for the future, even if new growth is not exceptional, even if new growth is very, very conservative. And one of the last points that Jennifer mentions, we retain our future options. As we all know, our economy has not been great. I would surely hope that our meals tax would increase on a personal level. I know that most folks in this community would hope that. But also our new growth, as well as other issues where the town has an opportunity to move forward. So we have the options in the future to continue to expand the OPEC as OPEB, as well as maybe capital stabilization. One of the good things that we have out of this budget statement is that we're going to have $460,000 roughly in the base budget this year, next year, in the years to come, because it's in the base. So add that to the meals tax. So now we have a conservative approach to funding our capital stabilization. If we have the opportunity next year, maybe to put in 0.10, we can add to that base. Whoever knows, none of us are going to be able to read the tea leaves as we move forward. but this is a great conservative, fiscal, disciplined approach, and I think, I thank you for at least putting this as one of the options, but I surely would wholeheartedly support Plan C.
Anyone else? All right.
I would make a motion that we adopt the budget policy with Plan C worked into it as has been presented this evening.
Second?
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Everybody understand this is our budget policy statement then for the coming year. It's how the town manager is going to develop the annual budget based on this policy. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Resounding aye. Good job.
All right, next item on our agenda, we have an application for new secondhand dealer's license, fines of all kinds. 661 Main Street is the applicant or the applicant's representative. If you would come to the microphone, identify yourself for the record.
Kimberly Parker?
And you want to open up a secondhand dealer shop?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, we hear from the police department. They have no problems with the request. And from the audio board, just to make sure that we have to have all requirements, including proper egress, lighting, fire protection, and parking.
Any questions from the board?
What is the business next to this one on Main Street?
It is a vacant building.
It's, okay. And I'm on the wrong block then.
Can you explain to us exactly where it is? I'm sorry, I don't know where 661 is.
It's behind Cape Cod Cooperative Bank. TLC Auto
Oh, okay.
Detailing used to be there.
The metal building there.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions from the board?
Make a motion to approve? Oh,
Second.
okay. So,
Motion and a second to approve the application. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Unanimous.
Good luck.
Thank you.
All right, next item on our agenda is to appoint the Veterans Council Committee at-large membership. Does anyone wish to offer any feedback right off the bat, or do we want to just proceed with voting?
Proceed with voting.
Okay, so everybody's ready to vote then.
Make a motion that we put all names into nomination, Mr. Chairman?
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second to put all names into nomination. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposition? All right. Because we have so many names, I'm going to ask for a roll call. I'll go down the board. We'll start with Ms. Moffett.
You want one at a time down the board, or you want all three
all
of mine?
three of your choices, please.
Randy Collette, Rebecca Silva, Curtis Fry.
All right, Mr. Murphy.
Collette, Silva, Fry.
Mr. Jones.
Silva, Colette, Maffei.
Ms. Flynn.
Colette, Silva, and Longo.
And I'm going to vote for Colette, Silva, and Fry. And
Sounds like we have it.
Colette, Silva, and Fry.
Colette, Silva, and Fry. Well, congratulations to all three of you. And the Veterans Council meetings are advertised, and you folks are now members of the Veterans Council. Thank you, and thank you to all of the applicants.
Mr. Chairman, I want to say that we had some additionally great candidates, and the decision was very hard. I hope that all of them remain active in the organization, because this is only a one-year term, and they will be coming up for either reappointment or new appointments next June.
None of them were here.
I think some of them were here earlier. It's been a long night for all of us. All right, the next item on our agenda, the special events policy. We have a few things here tonight to consider. We have the policy itself, and there should be in your packet a calendar of the special events and the dates. We have policy, the feedback that the board has provided to the town manager's office. There's some revisions to the policy. And then we do have a possible motion here if the board wants to proceed with this evening, or if we want to continue refining the policy. So, any questions from the board? How would we like to proceed?
Well, I have, on the first page, I think at the last paragraph, I think that should be policies and procedures, I think. Or is that really, procurers? Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
You're looking at the town manager's internal staff working group for special events. And so this is the town manager's proposal, and you have a suggestion, and I'm not clear on what it is.
Well, it's the very last paragraph.
Yeah.
It says the town manager may propose a dissolution of the working group at such times that policies, and I don't know if that means procedures or procurers.
Oh, it should be procedures.
Be procedures.
Okay.
Okay. Then on the page 2, under the village green, it says the village green is an historic Falmouth militia training area and shall remain free of all events, with the single exception of the lighting of the village green held in the month of November. I wanted to mention that we have had military events on the village green, and some may remember our centennial in 1986, our 300-year anniversary. We had a, what do you call it? The militia came out and recreated the Battle of the Nimrod, and they used the village green for that purpose. I also am aware that there have been certain religious events that have occurred on the village green and vigils, and that happened after 9/11. There were some people who really wanted to convene and have an event of prayer and remembrance of those who died in 9/11. So I just wanted to say that there may be some military, historic, or some events that may be, that the green may be the absolute appropriate place to have those. So I don't want to see those absolutely ruled out.
And I would tend to agree with you on that. I think we may want to look at trying to word that so that we're not excluding things. I think one of the things, too, worth pointing out is that public land is public land, and what we're doing here when we ask folks to apply for the use of public land, whether it be, say, the Village Green or town or Peg Noonan Park or any other property in the town of Falmouth, is we're essentially granting them the exclusive use of that property for a certain period of time in order to hold their event. Now, that doesn't preclude anyone from, say, walking down to the beach and holding an impromptu event, as long as they're not interrupting everyone else's use there. It's public land. What this does, what this policy and what our process of asking permission does, is make sure that you have exclusive use of that property for a certain period of time.
I want to say the other event that we used to commemorate each year was Flag Day. We haven't done that in a long time, and Flag Day was always held on the Village Green. And I'm trying to think, there was, well, when we had the militia, we had when Dave Vieira was the commander of the militia or whatever, when they wore the uniforms and all that, there were more occasions to use the green for events like that, and those haven't been done in quite a while, but I don't think that we should prohibit that through the language and say, well, you can't use that anymore because it's not there. But certain military, historic, certain commemorative occurrences that have prominence, I guess, in people's minds, that events like that be allowed on the green. Those are my comments.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Maybe if we use the term patriotic,
Okay.
it would cover all of those type of events you're speaking of, and they would still be permitted.
Well, except that 9/11 was not patriotic, really. It was more of a remembrance.
A remembrance, a
It wasn't a
commemoration.
religious event, so I
Right.
don't want to use that term.
Right.
But it was truly a,
Vigil? the word that you use.
Vigil, yeah, a vigil of certain kinds, maybe?
We can certainly.
Well, we can work on the word. You know what
Right.
the intent is, so maybe you can come up with the language.
There's no rush for us to
Okay.
pass this tonight, so if there's a need
Those are my
to
comments.
sort of go back to the drawing board with some of this wording, we can certainly do that.
Mr. Chairman, can I draw you back to the first page? I'm not sure where the rest of the board will be. But in section 2, under the delegation of permitting authority and the limits on delegating authority, there are several events and types of events named. And there's a note in here, are there other events with similar broad multi-day impact that the board would like to retain? So that's a question for the board to ponder.
And that may be worthwhile trying to ponder that before we make any final approvals here.
My reading of the policy is that if the Board of Selectmen can permit authority for the things listed, and without the Board of Selectmen acting, you follow rule number 3. Because right now I see a conflict between rule 3 saying Peg Newman Park shall have no events open to, which goods or services shall require payment, but we can give them permission to do so.
Right, it says.
And for an initial period, but I mean, number 2, it says events charged for goods or services at Peg Newman Park, we can grant permission. Is that only for the initial 3-year period, or is that at any time?
Well, based on the way the policy is written, I understand it to be for the 3-year period that we've talked about.
I agree.
I certainly have, it is an issue I think we need some more discussion about. I've received more emails on the issue of the farmer's market there than any issue since I've been elected selectman. And so,
Even more than the wind turbines.
yep. At least from different people. Maybe not numbers, but number of different people.
Number of different, certainly, it comes close if it doesn't exceed it, I'll give you that. Any other comments or questions from the board?
I just have one thing going back to Ms. Harper's suggestion of limits on delegating authority. And maybe we should come up with an event, or either events over 500 people or first-time events that would exceed 500 people. Meaning any events of that large a magnitude might be something the board might want to have a permit for.
And perhaps I would suggest not just a size, but maybe we need a broader set of guidelines to say first-time events that might require road closures, that might that fall under certain things where, for example, if someone wants to host an event in Marina Park that is maybe going to draw 100 people, that's something that, and they don't want any amplified music, they don't want anything, they don't need a liquor license or anything, it's just a family gathering maybe of 100 people, that could be easily approved by the town manager's office. But if they want amplified music or they're going to extend past a certain hour of the day, that it would come before the board if it was a first-time event. And then subsequent years, if everything went well and there were no issues, then we can hand the approval of the subsequent reapproval of the event off to the town manager's office. So maybe what we need to do is look at some general guidelines as to, what are the limits that we want to say, okay, if it's a first-time event exceeding these certain conditions, we want to see it before it gets approved.
Is it possible for us to have this discussion at our next meeting, or is there, we need to have this completed at this point? There's an awfully lot in this policy that I think I have it marked up on all kinds of questions, so I don't know. I mean, do we want to, I'm just, there's a lot to discuss here.
Honestly, my personal opinion is I'd like to stew on some of this.
Okay.
So if you have a lot of issues or questions, then maybe we need to provide some additional feedback to the town manager's office to ask for an additional draft. Like I said, there's no rush to get this done tonight, and I think there's also some folks here who might like to weigh in on this, and I am going to allow public comment on this because this is a policy that has broad-reaching implications for the town. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I think it's important, though, so that we verbalize tonight, because we come back here in another week, we're going to be verbalizing that. So I think we need to give the town manager at least, I think we're all in agreement, no one's voting this tonight, But if you have some issues, then we might want to talk about them. I'll get them on the plate here a little bit, because this will continue to languish, and we have 2014 coming very shortly.
True, very true. Mr. Jones?
I think my interest in adapting this policy was to eliminate some of the discussion, or not even discussions, but the things that came up that we didn't even discuss but voted almost pro forma, which for me were often more the wedding permits than the special events policy. I would think that every initial special event needs to come to us, no matter how big it is. That there aren't that many initial ones, and for the first time they come, I think that's an appropriate thing for it to come to the Board of Selectmen, to have the public out. It can be also their public outreach, or on TV, it can be their advertisement, but it is a chance for any new event. I don't see why it shouldn't come to the Board of Selectmen.
Other than weddings, because they only
Right,
happen once.
right. The whole wedding, the weddings things, I think, can be actually taken up by the town manager. I don't think that needs to be done by the Board of Selectmen.
Can I also say something to you, too? We're going to hear a lot of public comment. We've gotten a lot of emails. But there's an item that came from the town manager that I think we need to share with folks, the potential of that as a possible additional site for a lot of these events. Whether the board wants to embrace that idea or not is up to the board, but it surely could provide an opportunity for folks to understand that we're looking at events, and we got the list, I believe it was 80 some odd events that were in this community last year, besides weddings. And so there's a great number that have to be managed. No one's looking to say we're not going to have events. It's going to be the appropriate management of the events, and whether that means location, numbers, things of that nature. I think that's really where the board's ideas and ideals will be. But I think it's important to put in part of this discussion tonight that we're looking at additional alternatives for sites for some of these events. So I don't know what your thoughts are, Mr. Chairman. It's your meeting, so.
It's our meeting.
I know that.
I'm simply the first among equals.
Okay.
What I will say, and certainly for the folks who have come here regarding the farmers market, I want to try to narrow the focus, because this is a special events use policy, and it does deal with all special events. I know there's been a lot of discussion and a lot of concern about the farmers market. First of all, I think, and I'll speak for the board on this, we love the farmers market. We don't want to see it gone, but the farmers market is one of many events that takes advantage of Peg Noonan Park and the Main Street area, and we cannot simply cherry pick one event from another. We have to look and try to develop a policy which covers all events. And that's what this special events policy is all about. How it affects each event, and perhaps including the farmers market, is something, this is reason why we're not simply just rushing this through. We're obviously, this is the third or fourth draft of this particular policy that we asked the town manager to put together for us based on, we've had a couple of meetings about this already, and this initially was started during our retreat in August. So there's been a continuous process here of us trying to get public feedback and try to craft a policy which is going to help us get a handle on all of these events. And I understand that there are concerns about the farmers market. We will try to address those. Any public comment tonight, and I don't know, perhaps we should open it up to public comment and let folks jump in on this, but I'd like you to keep it to the policy in general. When the farmers market comes before the board for approval of its permit, that will be a time to discuss that particular issue specifically. Right now, if you have questions or comments about the policy, the special events policy as a whole, now's the time to talk about it. As Mr. Murphy alluded to, we've been looking at alternative sites. Marina Park has been mentioned. The rec center has also been mentioned. There's actually a relatively large grassy area in front of the rec center which appears may be usable for various special events, and potentially, yes, even the farmers market. So we want everyone to keep in mind that we're not trying to discontinue events or push them out entirely, but we are trying to get better use out of all the town's resources.
Well, I just want to say to
ask the board to consider Shore Street extension. I mean, we do close it
another one, yeah.
occasionally, because we close it for the Arts Festival, we've closed it for other events, and I think we ought to consider that as an option to close, because it doesn't have any particularly important function in the town in terms of public safety. It may for some in terms of parking, but not public safety. And we add that to our list of places where people could have an event, because it is asphalt. Some people don't want to be on asphalt, but some don't care. And it might be possible to use that for certain events. Somebody may want to choose that area. So.
And I think it's important also, you mentioned tonight about in front of the rec center.
Right.
There's a grassy area there that could be, based on a report from the town manager, the recreation director, and the Department of Public Works, that area could be leveled, meaning it could be filled in with some spots, and it's a grassy area right on Route 28. We're continuing to talk about extending Main Street, plenty of parking in and out, right there, vendor parking on the side of the building, for any event. It has some great opportunities, has some handicap accessibility that could be expanded as well. So it's fair to say that this board is not looking at just what we have. We're looking at other options, like Mrs. Flynn said about Shore Street Extension in front of the rec center. And a lot of these places have the ability of parking and have the ability of extending Main Street. That is one of the goals that this board and the planning board has surely worked long and hard on, is extending Main Street and the visibility. Okay.
And I apologize, folks, I was just handed a note reminding me, and unfortunately the library has an alarm system that kicks in at 11 p.m. And so what I'm going to suggest to the board, and I'm going to apologize to the members of the public, I don't want to cut anyone off, and I don't want to limit anyone with any discussion regarding this. So I'm going to suggest that we add this to our next agenda, and that we will put it earlier in the evening. We'll be back in the Selectmen's room during the next meeting. This evening we had to entertain a larger venue such as this because we had the joint meeting to begin with, and as you saw earlier in this evening, for those of you who have been here with us this whole night, and thank you for being with us all night, we needed the space for the joint meeting earlier this evening.
To that end, could I encourage people interested to make sure that they do what they can to get their hands on what the policy presently is, so that they really can talk about next time what changes they'd like to make to our recommended policy.
Right. It's a draft. So yeah, this is a draft, and if we could make sure that this is posted on the Selectmen's webpage.
Mr. Chairman, this has been on the webpage
Okay.
For the past weeks, and we'll certainly continue it there, including some modest revisions.
All right. So I'm going to suggest to the board that we feed your comments, suggestions, questions to the town manager's office. We'll make sure this is on the next agenda. We'll be at the Selectmen's meeting room next time, so we don't run up against this hard close at 11 o'clock. We'll try to put it on earlier in the evening. It's unfortunately everybody wants to be on early in the evening, and it's just a matter of trying to juggle. Folks, please. I understand, and like I said, I apologize. Unfortunately, there's an alarm system on this building, and we have to clean up and get out of here before the alarm system kicks in. Like I said, we had to have the larger venue because we had a large meeting tonight with 3 different boards, committees, and unfortunately, the Selectmen's meeting room would not have accommodated this. All right, well, we're going to be adjourning. And I guess with that, I'll see a motion to adjourn because we're going to need a few minutes for everybody to pack up, including the FCTV folks.
Second.
All right, any objection? All right, we are adjourned.